Board of Selectmen to order. First up is Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First on the agenda is Margarita Krylovic from Berry, Talbot, and Roya, which is the town auditor. Take it away.
I'll be taking it away. John Talbot. I'll give you a financial overview of the June 30th, 2013 fiscal year-end audit. As it says here, we're pleased to report that Berry, Talbot, Roya's audit of the town of Boothbay's financial statements for 2013 received an unqualified opinion, which means that the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects. Further, we noted no material weaknesses with the town's internal controls. So this presentation is intended to provide you with the financial results for the fiscal year 2013 and 2012 in comparative format in some of the schedules. We hope you find this information useful and understandable. And finally, we wish to express our appreciation to your staff who are so helpful to us during the audit engagement. It's a truly pleasure working with them. Let's start with the balance sheet accounts, where we show from one year to the next, 2013 being in blue here, and red 2012. You can see where you had more cash in 2012 than 13. So there was a decrease of approximately $170,000. Balance outstanding on personal property taxes decreased from the prior year. You can barely see it. You can see it's pretty small. The real estate tax collection rate was consistent with that of prior years. The tax collection rate is 97.31% for 2012 and 97.67% for 2013. Now you probably take that for granted, but for us that's considered pretty good because we usually hit 94, 95%, and you guys are hitting 97% collection rate, which is very good. Other assets here are generally comparable to last year. The decrease are attributed to taxes that went to liens, decreased by about $20,400 in 2013, and the tax required property on the books in 2012 was sold in 2013, so that shows the reason why there's a drop in the other assets that were included in that account. On the liabilities chart, the changes in accounts payable and accrued expenses are a result of timing and payments at the end of the year. Deferred revenues here, that represents taxes still unpaid 60 days after the end of the year, plus taxes paid in advance of assessment. The town put in a lot of effort into collecting the prior year taxes during fiscal year 2013, so as a result, the deferred taxes decreased from 2012. Now that's a good thing. The 60-day rule is what it's called, is that taxes that are on the books that have not been collected 60 days in the new fiscal year are basically removed from your fund balance and are deferred. So when you look at your fund balance, it's pretty conservative. And when that goes down, that means that you're collecting more. So that's what happened in 2013. Here's a graph of your outstanding debt. Looks like it's huge, but it's only $31,902 in 2012. And in 2013, it was down to $21,268, which is very low debt for a town. And just to show you how low it really is, the state would allow you to have a per capita tax of $45,928. The town's per capita tax is $6.82 for 2013 and $10.23 in 2012. So your debt is very low to what the state would allow. Not that I would encourage you to go out and get more debt, but I'm just saying that you're allowed to have that per capita, and yours is quite low. On the revenues, we'll compare the budget to actual for 2013, what you budgeted for versus what you actually received, and the variance. The tax revenues exceeded the budget due to the change in the deferred taxes and supplemental taxes that we just talked about. You get some additional supplemental taxes and you receive more money on your deferred taxes. So we didn't have to defer it, we could actually claim it. Excise taxes collections came in lower than anticipated. Licenses and permits came in lower than budgeted, so those are two negative items here. State revenue sharing came in slightly less than budgeted. Other intergovernmental revenues, the increase from the budget is attributed to receiving more local road assistance under the highway block grant. The positive variance in the charges for services is due to planning board fees, TV franchise fees, and agent fees exceeding the budget. And then the miscellaneous revenues exceeded the budget primarily due to the sale of town property and the St. Andrew contribution. With my eyes, that seemed kind of blurry. Pictures worth 1,000 words, kind of give you an idea of how your revenues are collected. Obviously, property taxes being the biggest one, excise taxes second, and then between miscellaneous this past year and all these other ones. It's basically what I just showed you in the graph in the pie chart. On the expense side, again, budget to actual. The general government had net savings due in part to savings in building and code enforcement lapsing into the fund balance prior to year end. Legal expenses, Shipbuilders Park and Block River boat launch. Those are the ones that we had from last year that just lapse into the fund balance, so it wasn't spent, so it increases your variance into a positive. Public safety and service expenses exceeded budget primarily due to the fire protection account. Public works, negative variance, essentially the result of overexpending the road construction and paving accounts and a lot of repairs and maintenance. Sanitation and recreation are virtually consistent with the budget. Debt service is over budget due to the tax anticipation note interest that was in the budget. The overlay in fixed charges was over budget due to more abatements issued than anticipated. Operating transfers, that's the transfer to the TIF district, was less than budgeted by about $1,900. Again, it gives you an idea of what makes up the variance. And again, put that into a chart and shows you where your expenses are going. It's no surprise to anybody that education takes a big piece of it, followed by the fixed charges and general government, and public works, so on. So what all this means is this: your revenues were over budgeted by $27,839. That's a good thing. Your expenditures, the budget, you were actually under budget. I said over budget. You actually lost $164,840, which is what shows up over here, $164,840. Oops. So you have a net excess of expenses, if you will, of $137,001. So instead of adding 2, you're basically not adding to your fund balance. Now, the numbers that we show in the expenses here, in the budget area here, embedded in that is your use of fund balance, of which there was $50,000 that was appropriated, and you had carryover fund balance from 2012, which we're going to use in 2013. So those two together add up to the $166,000. So basically, if you take that out, then your hole is even bigger. You get a $303,000 deficit. Then we have to transact the activity in the reserve funds, which are not in here, but they're part of your general operations, so we have to bring that in. And that's a positive number, so it brings down your decrease in fund balance of $213,631. That's your decrease in your fund balance. But because you have different fund balances, that you have to deal with, non-spendable, restricted, assigned, unassigned, here's your $213,631 deficit. But you spread it out over these various fund balances based on the activity. And what you end up with is that it hits the unassigned by $184,000. Okay. And the assigned here is what you budgeted for to use in 2013. So we take it out of the unassigned and we put it into the assigned. And and our understanding is in 2014, the budget was passed before the end of the fiscal year. So we had to address the fact that you are not going to use any of your fund balance in the 13-14 fiscal year, so we put it back to where it belongs. So I guess another way of looking at it is that you had the beginning unassigned, between this 50,000 and 572,000, you had $622,089 of assigned and unassigned fund balance to work with. And you had budgeted to use 50,000 of it. So if you were to, in a perfect world, if you were to use what you said you were going to budget for and use the fund balance, you'd have a targeted fund balance at the end of the year of $572,089. But instead, your actual results is that you have a net of these two of $134,309, which gives you an ending fund balance of $437,780. So you use more than you thought you were going to use, lowering your fund balance. And this shows up, this chart I just showed you just shows up as a, actually not a chart, but this graph, this exhibit here shows up as a chart here, showing you that the non-spendable fund balance here represents the amount of prepaid in inventory. You have to classify it that way. The restricted fund balance are made up of your reserves. I have the page number in the financial statement, so if you want to see the detail of that, 204,000. The assigned fund balance in 2012 consisted of the fund balance of 50,000 we just talked about, the low tax assessments. But in 2013, we decided not to do that, so that's why there's no blue here. It goes away in 2013. And the unassigned fund balance decreased, as I mentioned, another 134,309 from the 2012 unassigned fund balance. As a note, credit agencies typically look at minimum ratio of unassigned fund balance to budget of about like 20%. We recommend somewhere between 16.6 to 18.75% of your expenditure should be in your unassigned fund balance. And I think if you compare if you look at 6/30/2013, if you look at what you have for a fund balance to what you have for a budget, I think something like 5%, so it's pretty low.
So that's good.
It's bad.
That's bad.
Yeah, it should have a bigger, if you had a savings account of $500 versus a savings account of $1,000, you'd like to have a $1,000 savings account, so the bigger the number, the better. But usually what happens there is that the bigger your number, you don't have to worry about going out for tax anticipation notes because you have enough cash floating around.
We anticipated the fund balance being at that level, and then last year, you remember we adopted some fiscal policies. One of them was we set our undesignated fund balance to be 18.75%, the same number that it represents there, and we've enacted a 3-year plan to get that into compliance.
Here is your components of net position, basically on the full accrual basis of accounting. What I showed you prior to this is all fund accounting, how you operate your system, budget to actual. What we have to do is convert that to, full government, what they call government-wide statements, and mimic somewhat what a corporation would look like, where you capitalize assets, you depreciate it. On a budget to actual, you have your budget for your debt and the actual expenses when you actually pay the debt. But in a corporation or in a full accrual basis of accounting, you actually take the principal of the debt and put it on the balance sheet, and the only thing you have is the expenses, the interest on your income statement. So we kind of convert that. We have to do that. And the financial statements pretty much show under statements what full accrual is, and we also show you fund accounting and how we convert the fund accounting into full accrual. But again, these adjustments are recording capital assets. So that means that if you budgeted something and you paid for it, it shows up as an expense in your fund accounting. But if you look on the full accrual, the capital assets get capitalized, and the only thing you depreciate, the only thing you have for an expense is depreciation. And we eliminate the interfund balances, the deferred revenues, and we record long-term liabilities. And the restricted is composed of the TIF in reserves, and the unrestricted is free and clear to use, to operate your municipality. And this is what it looks like for your fixed assets, the infrastructure versus, your land improvements and vehicles and building improvements, pretty well divided. So that's pretty much a bird's eye view of your operations ending 6/30/2013 without going into a whole lot of detail. It gives you probably a view from 15,000 feet.
So I assume you've seen our plan to get the fund balance back up. I mean, does that look like something that is doable?
Well, it's ambitious because your fund balance, I had, and I don't know why, apparently it didn't say, but I had done a computation somewhere where I actually, see, maybe I have it over there. Let's see, let me take a look. Yeah, here it is. If you look at your 2013 budget, this comes off your assessor's report, okay, that's your budget. If you take 18.75% of that, you should have a fund balance of $1.6 million, okay? You have $437,780, which represents 5% of your budget. So you've got a ways to go to bring that from 400,000 to 1.6 million.
But you're going on the high end. I mean, if we went to 16.66,
Yeah.
so we're
It still would
a
be
little bit lower, not a
bit
lot.
lower,
But
right. So instead of 1.6, maybe it's 1.2 or something like that. But it's still, it's ambitious. It can be done.
What we gotta do is turn around the trend that we keep taking out every year.
right.
This was year one of the 3-year plan, and it just decreased another $100,000.
Year one of the 3-year plan is actually the year
Oh,
we're
this
in.
fiscal
Right,
year.
That's
this
the
fis-
year behind
Okay.
us.
That's right. And two, when you look at your budget and your expenditures, there are a lot of over expenditures. And obviously, if you're not raising it through taxes, you're going to have to eat away at your fund balance and your cash, which is the reason why your cash dropped as much as it did. Because you didn't raise the money for it, but you still incurred the costs. So it's part of the reason why your fund balance dropped as much as it did and your cash dropped as much as it did.
We had a lot of conversations in year one. This is year two now. You audited our financial statements, and we did some pretty aggressive change of chart of accounts to line up the budget to the audit to the commitment. Can you
Sure.
explain to the selectmen? There's probably sick of hearing from it.
Yeah. What we see here, we might be seeing a low fund balance, but we definitely need to commend the town for its continued efforts to improve and revise accounting procedures and improve the internal controls. We saw a lot of positive change last year. It's a working process. It's gonna take several years, but getting your internal controls right is the first step. It's gonna be that foundation where you can that you're gonna base your accounting information on. So one of the major improvements that we saw last year was, like Jim mentioned, revision of the chart of accounts. And it wasn't that extensive. I mean, we just renamed some accounts, we created a few new accounts, but what it actually did, the result was that the town is now able to track accounting information where it actually belongs. So you have these different funds that are not commingled anymore. And as a result of that, when you run your budget to actual report, you get a more accurate accounting information. And similar, along the same lines, the budget information is now going to be based on the actual budget articles. We've had some differences last year, but as far as now going forward, it's going to be correct. And once again, the importance of having accurate budget to actual information cannot be underestimated. So that is one of the most important improvements that I would emphasize. It gives you the ability to have timely and accurate financial information. you can rely on and you can plan. Other improvements included adjustments and improvements to the internal controls. And in a small town, it's basically oversight. We recommended that all time cards be reviewed and bank statements be reviewed, and that's a lot of positive changes started happening this last year. And what could be done a little better is still the accounts where transactions get posted to. We saw some accounts, nothing major, but once again, the more accurate accounting information you have, the better decisions you can make. So account classification could be a little bit better, but once again, it's a lot of positive change and one step at a time. Once again, it's the effort and the desire to improve that is an important factor to us. We have made some recommendations in the management letter. I'm not sure if you've discussed them with the board. So once again, just to sum up, it's a work in process, a lot of positive change, and next year we are expecting to see cleaner budget to actual reports, and it's going to make the audit easier too.
To the layman, I think what the public gets out of clean financials is transparency. The expense revenue report that you guys see every 2 weeks is now as simple as a printout, and anybody can see that at any given time. It matches the questions you answered at town meeting. It matches all of their work, so you can follow it from beginning to end, where before you would have to figure it out.
Yeah, there's no backing into a number. It's right there.
All right, so if any public member ever wanted to see in the warrant that the selectmen get, they get a budget to actual report that says we've expended 20% of this fund this year. And it is real, it's accurate to that warrant now. So, I mean, I'm not sure if anybody's ever looked through a warrant, but it's that kind of transparency that makes for good government.
Yes, sir.
How often do you guys review financials monthly?
Every 2 weeks we get a
2 weeks.
warrant.
And once again, just another point that I like to make. It's not very extensive modifications that were made, but small changes that really make a difference. Like for example, I know that the town started using the stamp on the warrants to keep track of the checks. So that's just another simple tool to make sure that your internal controls are where they need to be.
The account coding that Margarita had mentioned before, you see that we write on every single one of the invoices some weird number, and I think you guys have been doing it long enough, you know the number goes back to a budgetary account. Well, that's our way of making sure that we match the appropriate expenditure to the appropriate account, because we've written it right on the invoice. When it's submitted in the first time for review, I look at it, I make changes, I send it back to Tracy, Tracy makes changes, we finalize it, we bring it to you. Hopefully by 3 people looking at it 4 or 5 times, we make sure that everything goes in the appropriate account.
Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
We'll take a couple minutes just for them to pack up and then we'll get going. Next up is public comment. We have public. Would anyone like to speak?
I bet nobody thought they were going to get the auditor.
Ed, just state your name, I'm sorry. I know your name, but some people
Yes,
don't.
I'm Ed Shaw, I live in East Boothbay. I was wondering what happened to the negative vote on the TIF. I thought we lived in a democratic society where the majority ruled, but that doesn't seem to be the case here in Boothbay. Could you explain that to me?
Absolutely.
Well, I bet.
With the all of the articles that went negatively, we felt, and when I say we, the Board of Selectmen, felt that there was a lot of misinformation out there, and people looked at the TIF as a rotary, as a tax break for somebody, which are all false. So we felt it's very important for the town to revisit it again. There is nobody that will gain from a TIF except the town, period. And that's why we decided to revisit it.
But the town voted it down. They don't want it.
You know,
What are you
I
gonna
would
do now?
disagree.
Repackage it,
I-
dumb it down so that perhaps we can understand, and then maybe we'll see that you know better than we do.
What's amazing to me though, Ed, is you're the first person that I have talked to, honestly, that feels that way. I have had, I'll bet you, a dozen people come to me asking if we're gonna revisit it, hoping we were gonna revisit it. So, I mean, you have to take the townspeople as a whole, not just a few.
If you're not going to abide by a majority of the vote, what is the sense of voting? Have you decided what you will accept? You won't accept 55%? Will you accept 65 or 70? Perhaps you need to,
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, I disagree. So I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, I told you our reasoning for it. I can't tell you anything, I guess, that's going to make you happy, I guess, so I don't know.
Oh, I'm happy, but I'm disappointed in you.
I think all of us, or 4 of the 5 of us anyway, felt that most people can combine the bond and the TIF as one vote. And with the bond being absent at this point in time, and we can focus strictly on the TIF, we'd like to give people another shot to just, and if I'll be perfectly honest with you, if they shut this one down as a strictly TIF, I'll walk away with it with a smile on my face and thinking that I at least did the best I could for this town.
I've actually had 2 different people in the last week come to me personally and ask basically the same question. And it was amazing to me, after talking with them for 15-20 minutes, one guy was a half an hour, he came away from that discussion altogether different than when he started, because he felt, from what he had read, and he never came to any of our meetings, from just what he had read in the paper between the letters to the editor and everything, that all of the rumors out there were true. Once he realized what a TIF actually was, he was more than in favor for it. So, I mean, I think that a lot of people voted negatively for a TIF because, number one, they didn't want a rotary in the middle of the common, which had nothing to do with a TIF. They thought it was a tax break for a rich guy. I mean, let's face it, that's what people felt, which is absolutely not true. Once the facts are out there, I do believe people will go for it. What is the negative part of a TIF? I guess I would throw that to you.
Well, obviously you folks know more about that than a man on the street would, but the people said no, and you don't understand that.
No, I understand it perfectly clear, but
Well,
I
what are you
feel...
doing running it by again then?
You know how many times in this country things have been revisited?
Yeah,
Let's take one thing.
It doesn't make it right, does it?
Depends. If it's
You
something...
get your way, you just keep running
I would
by.
disagree.
Like state referendum, things
I
that
would-
just keep coming up, they just keep coming back till they get their way, is that right?
If it's in the best interest of the town as a whole, yes. I would put it forth 50 times if it's in the best
The
interest of the
people of
town.
the town have said no.
Okay. You feel that way, and I respect your opinion. I disagree.
You say this TIF, you're gonna have all these jobs for all these local people, right? All right, you got 2 TIFs, or Oyster Brothers and Washburn and Dowdy, right?
Right.
How many people do they employ?
Hundreds.
How many people?
I can't tell you that exact number.
How
I
many
don't
are
work there.
local residents?
I don't know that either.
Well, I think you should know.
But let me ask you this. Out of them, all right, let's say there's 200 people that work there. And out of them 200, just let me finish. Out of them 200, they work here 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Where do they eat? Where do they go to the store? Where do they get their gas? Shouldn't that play a part, even if they all lived in China? Shouldn't that play a part into the discussion?
Of course, but the main thrust of it is to provide jobs, right? That's what you say. Well, I understand that you can provide a job at...
And you also shelter the value. $20 million of this golf course is what he's going to put into this golf course in the next 3 years. Out of that $20 million, we can shelter that from the county, from the state valuation. In case you didn't know, we are the most highest assessed town in the county. We pay the highest county tax. I don't know about you, but I don't like that. So if we can shelter that from them, absolutely. And then the townspeople decide how that money's spent, not the county, the townspeople.
If you accept their vote,
No,
no?
if we accept their vote, then the county gets to decide where that money
You said
goes.
the town people decide.
Yes, if the TIF goes
They can't
through.
decide in this case. What's the difference?
I'm talking if the TIF goes through, the townspeople, that money goes, sets aside, the townspeople decide where the TIF money's spent.
Right, but you're saying that in one case, the town can decide, and in this case, the town can't decide.
With the no vote on the TIF, we will be assessed at 20 more, at the end of this, say it's $20 million. It could be give or take a couple of $1 million, but say it's 20. And if we leave it alone just the way it is, our town's assessment will go up $20 million. And out of that $20 million, the county's going to take their share.
You perhaps could convince me that the TIF is wonderful for the town. But you had your meetings, you had your open house, you had your town meeting, and you had your vote. I'm asking you to abide by it.
Well, if more people felt that way, I might agree, Ed, but you're the first person I've heard say that. Honestly.
And then you put out this question in, disregarding the way you voted, how do you really feel? Don't you think that people have enough brains and integrity enough to vote the way they feel? What's up with that?
I don't challenge the residents of Boothbay's intelligence whatsoever, but what I do challenge is the misinformation that was being thrown at them from all sides. If everybody came to these meetings and got this information from here, and walked away and voted, I would literally walk away right now without any hesitation whatsoever. But unfortunately, where most people were getting information was people on the street, just having general conversations, rumor. I haven't had anybody that I've explained a TIF to that said, even the ones that voted against it, totally, absolutely against it, that if they would have understood it, they would have voted for it instantly. That being said, now I'm going back to the intelligence of the people and the residents of Boothbay and saying, we're gonna inform them as best we can one more time. And hopefully they stop listening to the rumor mill on the street and see that there is tremendous benefit for a TIF in the town of Boothbay. There's literally almost zero risk of any kind. There's only strict benefit to this town.
Ed, let me give it a shot. I voted against the TIF.
Did you make a difference?
No. I voted against it. I stated my reasons in the paper. I like TIFs. I do. They can be a benefit to the town. Based on some information that Jim gave us last week, I think we've got a little bit more time where we can work on a TIF and make it work for the town and hopefully get buy-in. Dale had said earlier that 4 out of the 5 of the members wanted to put it forward.
Mm-hmm.
I voted against it because I didn't think there was enough time. I think given the time and the chance to rework the TIF, and Jim has already started reworking on it and sent it to the attorney. I think doing all that, we can come up with something that's a huge benefit for the town. But it's going to take some time.
That may be, the problem as I see it is you won't abide by the vote. And then you want another vote in February?
That's what I'm saying. I don't think we need to have a vote in February. And I voted against the vote in February.
So what are you doing now?
We are going, well, it's later on the agenda, but I believe we are going to wait until May town meeting.
I think that would be a wise idea, because
The reason why we wanted to do it in February is because we thought we were going to lose that captured revenue of $8 million that the golf course has put in this year. And $8 million is a lot of money to be of tax revenue on $8 million, I should say. It's not $8 million. But we have since found out that we can go in May and still capture that value.
We don't have the time constraints that we thought.
Right. So there is no risk. The worst case scenario with this TIF district, if the town in May voted for a TIF district, and we have the big TIF district and we're putting all the money into the TIF fund, and 5-10 years down the line it doesn't work. We say, you know what, no businesses come into that, there is zero reason to keep this. The townspeople, we take it to the townspeople by a simple vote at town meeting, you dissolve the TIF. That big pot of money, for lack of a better term, that's sitting there The townspeople determine where they want that to go, whether they want it to go to the general fund, whether they want to put it in an account and draw off it, whatever. But there's zero risk. There is no risk whatsoever.
But you keep mentioning about taking a vote. You took a vote, and you
Yep.
won't abide by it.
How many times in this country have there been votes and then it's been revoted? Many.
It doesn't make it right.
Well, not all, I disagree. When sometimes it's in the best interest of of the people, I would strongly disagree.
What about the will of the people?
The will of,
What about the knowledge of the people? Would you possibly consider that we, as the general public, were not educated enough about this when the vote went up the first time? And that they might have a better understanding of it with more time?
let's face it, we rushed it the first time. We'll be the first to we knew it going in, we was rushing it.
The first meeting that we had to release the information to the TIF, we knew we were gonna be under the gun. We knew we were gonna be rushing. We knew it was gonna look like we're trying to drive it down your throat because of a very tight time constraint. So we sat up here and we pled with people and tried to have them understand the TIF as well as we did. And we got a crash course in TIF too, and we even found flaws within the TIF that we were trying to correct before the TIF was even voted on. Because it was such a rush job. I don't think anybody's upset that we have a little bit more time to play with this now, that the time constraint's been released a little bit. We can actually think and relax and educate and just chill a little bit. But the whole point was we knew going into this that it was going to seem like we're just trying to drive this down and what that got was a lot of people really nervous, a lot of misinformation being thrown around, and a whole bunch of coffee shop talk that wasn't accurate. And you want to keep going back to the intelligence of the town. I don't think that I don't think that the residents of Boothbay are not intelligent. I think they were misinformed. And as long as I can straight face and say that what I'm doing, I think I'm doing for the best of this town, the best interest of the town of Boothbay, that I might be able to give it a little bit of economic development, a little bit of stimulus that somebody else can bite into, a small business can come into and get reap the rewards of a TIF, and maybe create a job or two. I will stand up here and scream from the rooftops that I still think I'm doing the right thing. And I don't like the fact that I have to go back and revisit it and say, no, I didn't like the way the vote went the first time, we're gonna do it again. It's horrible. I don't like it at all, but I still think that the reason it went that way was misinformation.
Well, I'm afraid it looks like you didn't like the way the vote went, so you revisit it.
I understand.
What can you do about that? Nothing?
We're going to do nothing. We are going to push, I believe, we are going to have a vote in town meeting in May for a TIF district, a pared down TIF district.
No bond issue,
No bond, no nothing.
strictly a
Simple
TIF.
TIF.
No order?
That wasn't part of the TIF anyways.
Ferris wheel in the column?
Right.
Nope.
But you know what's great? If you have a TIF and you include the common, and the TIF goes through, and 5 years down the line, if you want to put a purple gazebo out in the middle of that common, the townspeople could vote to do that and use TIF funds because it's within the TIF district and it's beautifying the TIF district. Now, I'm not saying I'm an advocate for a purple gazebo. I don't want my words to be twisted there, but you could do that. But the townspeople get to decide anything that's being spent there.
If you abide by the law.
No, I disagree. You know, you keep going back to that.
He's
Ed,
saying
but-
abide by the vote.
I know, and he keeps going back by that.
That's my
But-
problem with the whole thing, you won't abide by it, you took a vote. What happened to it? Go to the wastebasket.
Yep, you're right. I guess if you want to look at it that way, you're 100% right. I can't argue with you.
And I suppose I'm the only person in Boothbay.
Oh, I guarantee you're not the only person. Guarantee you. But as I said before, every person I spoke to, including most of the people that have voted against it, once they understand what the TIF would have done, just the TIF, and that's why I said I would have loved it if they would have separated the two. I know a lot of people looked at that rotary and they said, there's no way I'm voting for that thing because nobody's putting a rotary in the common. Okay, well, they shouldn't have voted for the bond issue, but they still should have voted for the TIF. And they all agree with that when it's all said and done. Once it's explained to them, once they understand the financial benefits or the economic potential benefits to this town and the zero risk behind it, they all said they would have voted for it. I haven't heard one person that once they understand the concept of the TIF, the model of the TIF and how it's supposed to work, I haven't had one person said they wouldn't vote for it. That's what gives me the drive to come back here and say, yeah, I know it looks like we just didn't like the way the vote went, so we're gonna drive it down your throat again. But I still say it's a great potential economic stimulus for this town.
We actually, to put you on the spot, I'm sorry, but we do have someone here tonight in the audience that's in the potential TIF district that would benefit from the potential TIF district that's building a brand new business there. Well, it's a existing business just expanding, and he's moving there from a different location, and he's bringing other businesses with him, I assume. So, if we need a poster child for it, I'm sorry I called you a poster child, but we've got, if we only get one business out of it, I feel if he's created a couple extra jobs in town, I think it's a great start. I mean, I was born and raised in this town. I'd like my kids to have that opportunity. I'd like their kids to have that opportunity. We need to do something to try to spur businesses. We're not going to get the DuPonts of the world in here. We need to have the guy that starts a backyard garage and works his way up, you know, I mean, or a mid-coast machine. I mean, there's a perfect example. Hudson Yacht started that way.
I don't want DuPont in here, we're gonna make that clear
Right.
too. We don't want anything that big, but certainly some small fabrication, light industry, absolutely.
Frank.
Yeah, I'm Frank Fassett, and straddle the line of both towns, but I guess I'm a Boothbay Harbor resident, but I property vote. Is it Ed? Is that the gentleman?
Yeah.
Yeah, Boothbay had a similar thing in the harbor with the water district vote, and it got voted down in Boothbay Harbor, which by 4 votes, which shot it down for everybody. And I went to a meeting much like you, and I was horrified to think that the selectmen were bringing the vote up again. You were much more pleasant than I was about it. And luckily the camera wasn't there that night, and I had a nutty, and I fought exactly the same way you did. And I left there so upset and so mad, and the whole democratic process thing, and I talked to everybody, and I was gonna make sure that vote didn't go through. And I was yelling and screaming at everybody, and trying to stir it up as much as I could, went and met with the water department, and finally, somebody much smarter than I was, which isn't hard to do, gave me a slap and said, hey, why don't you let the town vote on it again, and if everybody feels that way, then it'll hold. But if you go and try to ruin this vote, you're just pushing your own agenda. And I said, you know what, it made me feel so much better. I was like, you know, you're right. And the fact is that this TIF going through, it's far less complicated than it was before, and it's not the exact same TIF that was going through before. It has none of the attachment, it has, no, I shouldn't say none, it doesn't have as many of the attachments as the other one. So it's a similar question. And I'm waiting for somebody to explain to me why it doesn't make sense. And I would just ask you to have an open mind, come to these meetings, come to these workshops. I understand where you're coming from, but when somebody told me, just let the will of the people, that'll take care of it one way or the other. If I went out there and had a big campaign and spent all this money and made sure that that vote didn't go through, that would just make sure that my personal agenda was what stood, and not what the town people, and it got voted through. And I was fine with it. You know what? I felt fine about it. That was great. That was the will of the people. So that was the same exact question. This one's different enough so that I think if you could come to the meetings, they're very informative, and come in with an open mind like I did. Well, it took a slap for me, but I came around and calmed down. So.
We wrangled at our last meeting. We went back and forth about, because I mean, I'm on the same, I'll go back to the old putting in the water and sewer line at 27, what was that, 10 years ago.
Right.
The Board of Selectmen at the time proposed it, it got voted down. They proposed the same thing, same question, nothing changed again, it got voted down again. And I was in the same seat you was in. It's like you voted once, and they said no, you voted again. But again, that didn't benefit the whole town. That benefited, I guess, the industrial park. That was it, at the expense of all the landowners that abutted Route 27 at the time. And they didn't change that funding mechanism. It was going to put people out of their homes, I believe. And that's how I see it. There is no hidden agenda. There is no benefit to anybody but the townspeople of the town. And I really, truly believe that. I mean, Chuck and I have had our differences discussing the TIF when we were on the short term before. But our goal and our feeling was the same. A TIF benefits the town. I mean, there's no getting around that. It's just a pared down TIF makes it a lot easier. The TIF, as it was written before, gave the selectmen some powers, so to speak, that the townspeople, you didn't have to go to the townspeople for a credit enhancement, I believe it was. And we changed that at the kind of a self-imposed moratorium. That won't be in there this time. It will be, everything will go to the townspeople for a vote. So that, which is the way it should be. I hope we've answered your questions. I know not to the best of your liking, but
Yeah, you should answer my question, but I don't think it looks good.
I agree.
And I don't know what you can do about it, but I don't, you know.
We
but
knew
It'll
that.
help by not voting in February, you're gonna wait till a regular town meeting,
Absolutely.
you know, and if you can, you know, put a blurb in the paper that after due consideration, you know, they're gonna
Yeah.
educate people and.
We tried before, it was under the time constraints. This time, now we've got 5, almost 6 months to be able to, and it would get the TIF document out early, to be able to have people read it. I had one gentleman that brought the state law of a TIF to me. Great, I don't mind, I really don't. I mean, and if they can point out something that's negative, that I didn't see, because I don't sit down and read all the state statutes. I mean, I got better things to do. But if you can find something negative, great. But I haven't seen it yet. Like Dale said, I have not had one person say anything negative, that's been able to say anything negative about it to me.
I would think you would track the employees in these TIF areas to see how many of them actually are from Boothbay. I would think if you're
Well,
using this for an argument that,
Well, but the TIF, you're trying to spur business, because business is what you want. I mean, they're going to spend money in the town. I mean, let's look at, the stores over there. I mean, there's a store over in East Boothbay Village. I don't believe that could survive if them shipyards weren't there. I don't believe that store would exist. And I may be misspeaking, I can't speak for them, but they bring an awful lot of business over there.
I know what it's saying, though. We need to take care of our own, for
I agree.
lack of better words. Businesses need people to work, but we also need to make sure that the people of Boothbay are working.
Mhm.
Now, they are going to bring in some from outside of the region, but we need to make sure that the majority of the jobs that are getting created are coming from folks in the
People here
region.
to fill them.
Right.
We don't create the industry to bring them, to get families here, to create people.
I mean, it's kind of a vicious circle.
Full
The
circle.
school department has gone down 25% in enrollment in the last 10 years. 25%, that's 200 kids no longer in our school that was there 10 years ago. That's huge. If you don't have families here, who works? The parents.
I think you also need to, there's great articles out there, when I was on the Mobilize Maine, to really understand the impact a business can have on a community. It goes way beyond somebody buying gas and sandwiches, which they do, which is important, which the town needs. But you've got people that come in to look at these boats or work with these project managers that stay in B&Bs in town. They're staying here overnight. They're here for long duty cycles. You've got temporary work that they may bring in, that may have a special skill. But these guys, they put them up at the flagship.
Right, hotels.
I mean, I know the hotel circles around here. They're staying at the B&Bs in town. They're staying at the flagship in town. I think there's a lot of trickle down that occurs from these businesses in this town.
Well, heck, just the one project that we happen to have going at my job now. I mean, that whole crew is staying in town for 4 weeks.
Yeah, and both of those business guys, as you know, are growing. Both of them are growing. They're both busy. So I think there's a lot of ramifications from. I think he's making a good point about understanding the number of people that work here and the impact that has.
But I think we,
To-
not to throw anything negative into this
there's a lot out
conversation,
there.
but, I mean, like a credit enhancement agreement, we can attach jobs to the credit enhancement agreement, but I don't think you can attach where those people reside to those jobs. I don't think. I mean, we'd certainly be willing to investigate it, I would, but I don't know if you're ever gonna be able to say, you know, you're gonna employ 10 people, 3 of which have to reside in the town of Boothbay.
Well, nothing that stops locals from applying for those jobs.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying, but I don't
We
think,
can't control that.
but you can't attach it to the agreement, you know what I mean, or the TIF. I
Right.
don't believe.
I'd be surprised.
But if there's a
if you
TIF district created tomorrow, and a business came in that wanted a credit enhancement agreement, which allows them to get a portion of their taxes back to invest into their business, you can be creative as much as you want. You know, I mean, you could say, well, as long as you retain 4 employees, like 20 employees, however you word that, and then it would go to the townspeople for a vote, and if the townspeople don't feel that it works, then it don't go through. Anybody else? We move on. Thank you, Ed. Next up is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting from 11/27/2013.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Must be all of us tonight. Okay, on to old business. Cross River property request for proposals.
So the deadline for proposals for the Cross River property expired last Friday. The only bid that we received is the one that's in front of you, which remains sealed until this meeting per the RFP.
We do have people here from the Land Trust, I assume. Wonder if we can, I guess we can't really see what it is first. Dear Selectmen, founded in 1980, the Boothbay Region Land Trust has been conserving for the public benefit for the natural habitat, scenic beauty, and working lands of the Boothbay region for over 33 years. We are pleased to submit for your consideration this proposal for the Cross River property. I guess that's just the thing that we asked for.
Yeah, we had a form, just in case we had a lot of applicants, data that was formatted so that we could kind of sort them.
Maybe it would be easier if do you have someone here that can summarize this for all, rather
Aren't
than?
you meant to read it in total?
I think you have to read it and present it to the public.
In total?
In total.
That's what the RFP was.
Well, yeah, but it can't be approved by us anyways. It would still have to go to town meeting.
Understood, but you were to read the whole thing.
A lot of work went into that.
Boothbay Region Land Trust, hereafter BRLT, proposes that the town of Boothbay transfer ownership of the Cross River property, map R5, lot 1A, to Boothbay Region Land Trust. Transfer of land trust proposes that the town of Boothbay transfer ownership of the Cross River property described as Assessors Tax Map R5, lot 1A, the so-called Smith property, to the land trust for public use and access to the Cross River as approved by the voters of the town of Boothbay at their May 6, 2002 meeting. Originally acquired by foreclosure, the Cross River property was leased by the town of Boothbay to the Boothbay Civic Association in October 2002. Under the agreement, the association was committed to provide walking and hiking trails and facilities for picnicking and boating. The BCA also proposed to construct a community arts center. Those activities were never completed. The Land Trust is committed to establishing parking facilities, developing hiking trails for public access, fostering working waterfront access for clam diggers, and providing public access to the shore for recreational use. The Land Trust will consider building handicap accessible trails and may consider constructing a nature center with Land Trust office space and public meeting and educational facilities contingent upon site planning and funding. Value of the offer on the property. The Land Trust will provide trails, parking, and waterfront access free and open to the public and will maintain the property in perpetuity. The Land Trust will also enhance access to the Cross River for clam diggers, and should the Land Trust construct a nature center on site, it will offer significant job opportunities for local contractors. Amount of investment in the property. The Land Trust investment will be the cost of construction trails, parking facilities, maintenance, insurance, and the potential of constructing a new nature center and related amenities. Funds will be provided by granting agencies, public and private, individual donors, and the Land Trust for operating budget. Future property value. The value of the property will be increased with the addition of the infrastructure described above. The general value of the property is similar to that for all of the preserves. Economic impact and resident valuation of the Boothbay Region Land Trust, Appendix A study dated February 2013 conducted by Dr. Todd Gabe, a senior researcher at the University of Maine, Orono, shows that the users of the Land Trust preserves contribute significantly to the region's economy. Many other studies have demonstrated that conserved land increases land value in adjacent or near properties, contributes to attracting new residents, and improves the general well-being of the community. Expected use of the property. The expected use is consistent with that voted by the residents of the town of Boothbay and reiterated by the BCA lease, public access. Furthermore, setback requirements limit potential development of this property. The Cross River contains 317 plus acres of productive mudflat for clamming. Access to this significant resource is currently via boat, 12 miles round trip from Nicotine, across private property or across the unimproved Cross River property. 0.3 mile hike each way through the forest. The Land Trust plan would significantly enhance access to these flats for area claimants. The Land Trust proposals would provide the potential for area employment related to the planning and construction of facilities, local contractors for trail building, parking facilities, signage, possible nature center construction. Timeline. The Land Trust timeline for property investment is as follows. Trail and trailhead development within 1 year. Visioning and planning process for improving waterfront access and site development, including a nature center with the Land Trust office space and public meeting and educational facilities to serve as a gateway to Boothbay Region public lands within 2 years. Implement construction plan as funds become available. The Land Trust has had great success in raising funds through private and governmental agencies and from private donors. Davis Conservation Foundation, Field Ponds Foundation, National Recreation Foundation, Norcross Wildlife Foundation, and more, which are private. Land for Maine's Future, which is state, and North American Wetland Conservation Act from federal. The Land Trust is a broad base of voting resident donors who recognize the need for public land access and have shown a willingness to provide the support to fulfill the needs. Ability to retain public access. The Land Trust history clearly demonstrates a commitment and ability to retain public access. The Land Trust has 22 public access preserves and is devoted to maintain that access in perpetuity. The Land Trust currently provides over 30 miles of hiking trails for the region's residents and visitors and also maintains working waterfront sites on Damascove Island and on Barters Island. Conserving and increasing access to the area's precious waterfront is one of the Land Trust's top priorities. That's it.
Are you gonna mention the attachments?
Yeah, it states the appendices. A, Economic Impact and Resident Valuation of the Boothbay Region Land Trust by Todd Gabe, Amy Hodner, and Luke Finnemore, School of Economics, University of Maine, 2013. Cross River Property Land Use Analysis, Knickerbocker Group, and Cross River Property Buildable Area Analysis Survey Map, Cross River Property Aerial Map, and Letters of Support. Some of the attachments.
Could I call your attention to one of the letters of support comes from, I believe it's 12 claimers who have strongly supported the facilitation of working waterfront.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So who's speaking on behalf of the Land Trust? I know you get a lot of reps.
Well, I'll be happy to speak. I'll answer any questions. I'm Jim Dunn, and president of the Land Trust presently.
Thanks for coming tonight.
We feel that, there aren't really too many town facilities for hiking, and the Land Trust provides that for the peninsula. And we're very anxious to include in the properties that we do have open for the public, this Cross River property. It's been fallow there for I don't know how many years. Obviously, the BCA had trouble doing their proposals. We feel confident that we can do a better job. We have to own it to be able to get grant monies to do any of these things. So we can't take a posture like the BCA did about getting a lease or something like that that they did for 5 years. I'd also bring to your attention one thing that is attached, and it was mentioned in several things that Steve read, and that is the study that we had the state of Maine, University of Maine do for us, because we wanted to find out what was our value as a land trust to the community. And it's good reading. they did a very scientific study. They were here for several months during the summer. They extrapolated data on what the land trust, not what the botanical garden or other things do, what's it do for the town. And I think you'll find some interesting statistics there about, excuse me, the amount of money that visitors to the land trust, of which there were 13,000 of them, what they spend in the town, and the number of visits they made. There were 65,000 different visits to our land trust properties. And those visitors, according to the study that the University of Maine did, they spent $3 million. And that equates to a lot of part-time jobs. Some of the things you mentioned before about where these people eat, where do they sleep when they come to visit us. I think you'd find from the chamber that the land trust properties and brochures are a very big draw. We're told we're the biggest draw in the chamber in brochures being taken. So there's other questions. Some of us can answer them, I'm sure. I got a frog in my throat. Excuse me.
My question is that it mentioned the RP, the proposal mentioned office space. Is it correct to surmise that you would be making this kind of your flagship office space rather than up here?
Well, you know, we rent space.
Right.
And we don't, that building is for sale. So we don't know how long it would even be available to us.
So this is a large strategic decision to put in this
Yeah,
proposal.
and that's not to say we're gonna do it. We have to find the money and we have to do the study and all this other stuff. There's a potential for us doing it.
We investigated that a couple of years ago when an architect was on our board, and we would do a green building as a kind of demonstration construction project.
So, I
And it
don't
would
know.
include office space, it would include meeting space, and it would include a library and museum. We've got artifacts from a dig on Indiantown Island that we can't display because we don't have the space.
So I don't know if I've ever, I mean, I've had a few conversations personally with Chuck, you know, about and I don't know if I've ever said it publicly, so if I have, forgive me, but when you say you want to build office space or something, I mean, in my head, I mean, I remember back, I mean, I'm not real old, I'm not going to tell you how long ago it was, but there used to be, across the street from that property, there was a rest area there. I remember it vaguely when I was a kid. Just simple picnic tables, and kind of in my head I would envision, I was hoping to see something like a, for lack of a better term, a welcome center kind of thing, where you would pull in, you'd be able to go to use the restrooms if you have to, and say, geez, I have like a little map, say, I'm here, how do I get to, say, the botanical gardens? Or how do I get to one of your land trust places?
Stephen Niculo, I'm director of the Boothbay Regional Land Trust, and I think that's if you read the specific wording in the proposal, it says nature center with office space and environmental education facilities and public meeting space. So I believe, you know, that we also use the term gateway to the region. The location of that property is so prime that I don't think you could have a structure there without inviting the public in to a nature center, teaching people who come through the region about the natural history and the human history of this region, and then sending them on their way down to the different places that they'd like to visit.
And how I would see it would be, you know, I mean, I would think, and I can't speak for all these places, but I mean, like the Chamber, the Botanical Gardens, Bigelow, would welcome promoting their place at your place and at that place, and would be, I would hope that they would be willing to help build a place like that. I mean, I don't know if they would. I mean, that's just my wish. You know what I mean?
Isn't that everybody's?
Right. You know, but that's how I would see. I would love to see something like that there, kind of like it used to be, but a little bit better. Because I mean, when we all travel, I mean, when I travel by car, I mean, you pull into these places and you get out and stretch and use the restroom, and you kind of go over the big maps that they have there, and it kind of shows you where you are and where you want to go. And, I mean, there's so many people that stop out here and ask how to get to the botanical gardens. or something similar, you know, and it would be just nice to have that map out there to be able to say, oh, I go around here and.
It's also a spectacular opportunity to be able to share some of the historical land use of the region with that substantial mud flat right there. And how neat would it be for visitors to the region to be able to experience firsthand the clammers out on the flat and see them doing their thing during low tide. I think there's great potential there. People don't get to see that very often. It's a good, true Maine experience.
So, go ahead.
It sounds to me, just from listening to what you read there in their proposal, that what the Land Trust is offering to do is enhance the vision that the voters had back in 2002 when they voted to retain that property for access.
Right on.
That's it.
So, going to the other side of it, you're always going to have people that will say the Land Trust owns enough land in the town of Boothbay already. Why should we give them more? And I'm not saying this is my feeling. I'm telling you, I've heard it.
I also hear the same thing about you take property off the tax rolls, and that has been proven as not factual. Many studies have been done, not only in this town, but by various organizations nationwide, that prove that conservation properties do not hurt local towns by taking them off the tax rolls. Plus, this property doesn't pay any taxes at all right now. You do pay insurance on it, which the Land Trust would, of course, would pick up. But I think those are rather minute facts in the discussion.
Can I change subject for you just for one second? Yeah, absolutely.
Could I follow up on that?
Just one second, if I could. One of the things that they're talking about too is something that we talked about earlier. They're looking to relocate to the town of Boothbay, build their facility, which will open up more jobs, employ more people. Those are benefits as well.
Where is your facility now?
It's right across from the motel, across from.
Village Cash and Carry's property.
Oh,
The
okay.
old mini golf course.
Okay. Well, he was talking cash and carry, that was before. Some of us remember going in there and getting sandwiches and pizza.
Could I follow up on the tax?
Absolutely.
My name's Nat Wing, I'm a past president, and I'm on the committee that wrote that report. There are numerous studies, but the one that I usually refer to is by the Trust for Public Land. And for every tax dollar taken in by a township, 35 cents will go to conserved land, whereas for development, it's $1.17. So development in the long term costs the town. Of course, it has spin-off benefits, but it's really a bit of a red herring, you know, taking the land off the tax rolls has significant benefits as well. It brings in retirees like me.
Do you have,
That's
this study, but do you have more than one copy of that?
Yeah, we have plenty of copies.
Could you
of
get
that
Jim 5 for each selectman, and that way we
Tomorrow.
could, okay. Just drop it off here and he can put it in our boxes.
Absolutely. I'd also like to bring to your attention, and you'll be receiving it in the coming weeks. Annually, Boothbay Regional Land Trust voluntarily writes a check to the town of Boothbay, Boothbay Harbor, Edgecombe, and Southport. And we base the amount of that contribution on the state's open space program with public access and Forever Wild. It's not a significant amount of money, but it is a contribution made by the Land Trust in good faith.
Would you be open to, and this is strictly me speaking now, if we was to put something forth to the voters for approval, putting a timeline, if you will, in there saying that we would like to have a, my term, welcome center, your term, education center, same thing kind of, but within 5 years, 10 years.
Well, I don't think we could really do that because we don't have the money in the bank. We have to go to grantors and sell them. I've written a goodly number of grants in my day, and sometimes they take a year, sometimes they take 2 or 3 years to say, yes, we will do this as a certain date. I don't really think we can do that. We can say the things that we can do by ourselves. We will get those trails in there. We will find a place to park trucks closer to the clam flats. But as far as saying, yes, we're going to have a building up by a certain date, I'm reluctant to commit to that.
I think they've put forth a good faith timeline.
Yeah, within a couple of years, the trails will be in there and the road will be. That's.
And I think
that's
fundraising in our timeline, you'll also see it says implement the construction plan as funds become available, and that really is based on the fact that our funding is entirely voluntary contributions, and some years are better than others, and sometimes the state government, the federal government, and the and private foundations are more generous than other years. So it really is contingent. It's difficult to make a promise like that without having that money in the bank right away.
Personally, I understand that entirely. I've been kind of ominously mute on this thing. I've been trying to take it all in. I like the proposal. I make it very clear. I mean, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's what we were looking for. We didn't really have anything that we were looking for. We were looking for a decent proposal, and I think what we just saw is a great proposal. My only real hesitant about this is, all right, we're going to give you a lot of land, hypothetically. I'm not saying we're giving it to you, but and the location for that, for the center, is beautiful as far as I'm concerned. It's, you know, the entryway, the grand entrance into the town. My only hesitation is you also have one, another grand entrance into the town prior to this, up across from the old Ponderosa. So what prevents, you know, we give you this large parcel of land, and then all of a sudden this center or whatever ends up across from the Ponderosa instead of down on Cross River. It's just a hypothetical.
We're constrained about where we can build.
Okay.
With the
Right.
conservation.
So that property, it is a gorgeous piece of property that Zach Preserve you're referring to.
Yep.
That property is currently, has conservation easement, which is held by Sheepshead Valley Conservation Association, limits the amount of development that's permitted on that property, so.
All right, so the follow-up to that is, with that being said, if there are restraints, which is, I was wondering if there might have been, it'd be kind of foolish, and I'm not trying to call anybody a fool in this room, but it'd be kind of foolish not to do something there. That is the entrance into the town. That is what's gonna give them the high visibility. Every vehicle that passes down 27 is gonna go right by. I don't think, I'm with you, I wouldn't put a commitment like that in a letter. It would be nice for us to have that commitment in the letter. I wouldn't do it, but I understand why he'd like to see one, and you understand why we'd be hesitant to just, here's your land and hope you do something with it.
I think to be reasonable, it would be the likely intent of the land trust to build a gateway, nature center, public access, office space. But really, the proposal is not for that. The proposal is to build the trails and to increase working waterfront access. That we can promise.
Right, and I kind of got that out of the proposal.
And when you get your own copies of that and see the letters of support, I think there's 12 or 15 clamors, as well as some local businesses and the likes.
Civic associations.
Yeah.
Big Civic Association.
I would also say that the bound report there is pretty dry reading. It's a lot of statistics and things like that. There is a summary that I think I'm going to ask Nick to attach one copy of the summary to the full thing, in case you...
Dry. Did you
can't-
sit through our auditor's report? Just saying.
Can I make a recommendation?
What do we do at this point in time?
Right, so you did an RFP process. Obviously, you don't have to decide which RFP makes the most sense. You don't have to figure out equity there. There's one.
Right.
If that RFP intrigues the board, and obviously it's bigger than you can probably consume right here at the table, I would say if our board directed me to work with Nick and his board, we can flush out all the questions, set up a meeting between leadership and leadership. It's sometime in January to discuss how we move forward.
I think that, there's only 3 of us here right now. I wouldn't want to, we have to have the full board's
Yeah.
Yeah, no
On
offense,
board.
I don't mind approving minutes of the last meeting with 3 of us sitting here, but on something like this, I definitely would like to have all 5.
So what you guys have to do is decide
Is
what
of-
to send to the voters.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, we
You
can't
don't-
just, we can't just say, yeah, that land's yours, by no means.
Oh, clear.
But,
Gotta go to the meeting.
I think it means a lot, if we was against it, obviously, it wouldn't help your cause any. Although, I don't know.
Might help more than you know.
That being said, there are 3 of us here who seem to like the proposal.
Oh, I
and
think we-
we should have Jim start
Yeah.
working with it.
And I was gonna say that, I think we can give that kind of direction, this is, we can start working the bugs out, but we're not gonna do anything more official than that, I think, until we get 5 guys.
Well, when we went into this, I don't think there was any of us, well, maybe one, I'm not sure, but, I mean, any of us sitting here that was saying that the town needed to sell the land. My point, I can only speak what I was saying, is we were sitting on a piece of dormant land. That makes no sense. Do something with it. If the town's going to own it, we need to do something with it, or at least see something. And something like this, if it's got public restrooms and the little map, I'll be happy. But I think that's kind of what, I mean, we were all hoping for, so to speak. You know, I
I'd
mean,
like to make one last comment.
Sure.
We talked a lot about the, welcome center, all those things. In our proposal is some facts about the economics for jobs in this community, access for clamors and the likes of that. And I think that's a very important part of our rationale for wanting to do this. We do have other places where we have access to the water, whether it's Damascove or Bar Island or Roberts Wharf, where we support property for fishermen to buy up and get their baits and all this other kind of stuff. This is a little different because it's clam flats. So I think that was a very significant, poignant part of our proposal. So I don't overlook that aspect in your review of it.
I'm Michael Warren, the lands manager for the trust, and I think this went exactly as we were hoping, that you would appreciate what we're offering up front and take the time to consider it in detail. There's a lot of information you have there, and I think that it really needs your scrutiny, and before you take it to the voters, such as the TIF, take the time, look at it, and work with us, and I think it's a huge benefit to the town, and to the area.
I think Nick and I can probably flush out questions on both sides over the holidays, but I don't see board leadership flushing it out over the holidays. So that's what I would suggest is each board authorize us to flush out these questions. I mean, Chuck can send me an email, find out about this. I can go to Nick, find out about that. We can do that information exchange easy. And then we set some time up in January to have a very public discussion about what we've learned with very thorough knowledge of the proposal. Because I mean, if I were the land trust leaders, I would also want to know, if this transaction were to happen, what does the purchase and sale agreement look like? You know, because that's a big step for an organization too. So
we would have some cost, legal costs.
there could be some, yeah.
You know, I mean, if you're gonna transfer land, you're gonna have legal costs. At the very least, would the land trust be willing to pick that up?
I don't have an idea of what it is.
I mean, I think we would have to consider it.
We'll split it.
Obviously.
Well, my point being is the land has really cost the town. It hasn't, but it has in taxes, you know what I mean? The least we can do is try to not cost us any more, the townspeople, is what I'm getting
Get a
at.
favorable reception. I'm not on the board.
Right.
We can flush that question out.
But it's important we get these for everybody so they have a
Yeah,
chance
I
to.
will actually get a copy of the entire proposal
Good.
for all 5 of them.
That'll work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna leave this with Jim for now. Oops, yes.
I have a question for the land trust. How many acres do you presently control?
1,700.
Yeah, 1,700 acres of conserved land, so that's not all
Some of
fee
that
land,
is
some of it is
Is that
conservation easement.
just Boothbay or everywhere?
That's everyone on
On
the
the
peninsula.
peninsula.
So what about just Boothbay? Do you know that?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, not without looking at our books.
It's in our comp plan stuff,
Thank
but
you.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head either.
And that includes, I think it's
We'll leave this with you for now until we get our copies.
A significant amount of the habitat we protect as well is primarily undevelopable habitat in many instances also.
And I know the island's figuring in that 1,700 as well?
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, just curious.
There's a lot of that.
Well, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
coming and your interest. Next up is tax increment financing development plan.
We are,
There's that horse here.
Hold on.
So, in your,
Did you need a vote of the board to have you work with
I
him?
think I've got consensus. If you want to vote, I always feel better with a vote, but I don't feel like I need one.
Yeah, we're not, I don't know, what do you think? I mean, we're not really, we're not
Yeah.
authorizing him to go into any kind of a contract or anything with him.
No, you're authorizing my time, and sometimes when I feel like that's not supported, I'll ask for a vote. In this case, I'm pretty sure you guys want it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the development plan comes up again.
So electronically, I have distributed a redrafted, and it is watermarked right on the document that it is a draft document. We did probably a lot of subtracting, not a lot of rewriting, to get this draft available. But I think what's more pertinent is I also sent an email out that I included in your packets. When we were doing research on the development plan, we have to go back to all of the fundamental pieces of information that we used to develop the plan from the ground up. And when we did that, we went into all of our assumptions, because obviously you put together a lot of assumptions. One of the assumptions was that when we were calculating out the bond, we had to figure out what the TIF revenue would be. And it came out to a number. And when we've referenced that number in the past, we've said that's year one TIF revenues. Well, if you reinvestigate the assumptions that were made, that's collecting actually 2 years of TIF revenues, because TIF law allows you to go back 2 years to calculate captured revenues. But when you split those 2 years out, you find that 99% of the TIF revenues are in the more current year, or in the older year. So what does that mean in layman's? That means that we could postpone a TIF vote until past April 1, but before April 1, 2015, and still capture 99% of the value. The 1% of value that you would lose would be transaction value. You buy a few pieces of property, you merge them together. If that increases the value of the property, that's lost value. Maybe some minor constructions that we're doing, but I doubt it they really amount to anything. So in that email, I put in really bold, this gives us a lot more time to consider this. With that information, changes the whole game plan.
it does, but I'm gonna speak pretty clear. I don't wanna see us, I don't think we should sit on this for an entire year. I don't want anybody to think that we're driving it down their throat. I want to have enough time to get people educated, but I think while the TIF is still somewhat of an issue, people are still aware of it. I don't want to lose that. I guess in some rationale, you could say let it die for 6 months and then pick it up again, but
I think May.
I think town meeting would be the time to do it.
I agree. I didn't put a recommendation in because the TIF is
But
obviously.
I need to go back one step for a second, and I'm a little disappointed in our attorney for not stating that to begin with. I mean, I understand we were under bond constraints, and we are. I mean, we were trying to get a bond at the same time, but I would have much rather have put it forth in town meeting than a month ago.
Everybody's so focused on that matching funds
Right.
with the state.
Well,
I agree.
that
And,
was the driver.
but my point being is, it took our town manager that makes a lot less a year
He's
than our
awful
lawyer
smart.
to find that.
A lot less, by the way.
Yes. So, I mean, that disappoints me a little bit, I mean, I'm glad that you found that, don't get me wrong, I mean, but attorneys get paid good money for a reason.
But I mean, in their defense, they're putting a lot of assumptions together. They're tic-tac-toeing a lot of pieces of law. And you know, I have the time. I mean, so how did we stumble across this? I started working up a mock credit enhancement agreement with the new business that's going in the TIF, because I think that's going to be an important part of the reproposed TIF agreement, is that it has kind of a flagship credit enhancement agreement in it. So when we did that, we had to start over the assumptions with the credit enhancement agreement, and I started writing it up. Well, I went back to law and I followed, and so I stumbled across it myself. It may have been one of those things that the attorney was writing off as inconsequential amount of captured monies, but I don't know. But we checked it with our attorney and it's absolutely correct.
I guess I can say I'm disappointed too, but I don't really mind the fact that we didn't have this information prior to the original vote. What I was disappointed is right after that vote, when the bond died, that's when that information would have been nice to know, so we could have just relaxed a little bit, take a breath, and we could still go back and revisit the TIP and not feel like we were so much under the gun. I think it would have made the last meeting a little bit more
Easier.
right, just more relaxed
Well, it's
environment
fine.
than, huh?
It was a good meeting.
I don't know, but yes, but that's where my disappointment comes in. But no harm, no foul. As far as I'm concerned, it's good information. It's good news.
I mean, I can't, your thoughts of May?
Yeah, I think we'd be a lot better off with May. That way we can have a lot more people in here. They'll have a chance to digest the document. If they don't like things in it, they can suggest changes. It gives us a lot more time, guys.
Can you have a TIF document for public consumption by our January meeting, first January meeting?
Yeah, I mean, essentially I have one now. It's a draft document which is open to scrutiny and it's publicly available now. We haven't flaunted it, we haven't put it on the website.
Have you guys read it yet?
I have not.
I read portions of it.
I've gone
I
through
didn't
some
get
of
the
it.
whole thing.
It's this
I've
big.
gone through some of it.
Well, why don't you guys read it, and then it's all right with you, and then you can release it on the website and make copies available. We can make the announcement on Facebook and online and in the paper.
Well, it's public now, Frank.
Right.
It is
But, is it ready, but it's not ready to go, is it?
it's just not.
It's not
really
approved by
available.
us.
Right,
It's not official, but,
yeah.
you know, I wouldn't be
I'd like
opposed
you
to
guys
putting
to be
that,
involved
I wouldn't be
with this.
opposed to putting that draft on the town's website for the simple fact, if someone wants to poke holes in it, now is the time.
Actually, if we're gonna put a draft up there, I wanna see the marked up copy. That way they'll see exactly where the changes.
Oh, you're from the old one, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Selectmen have in
Good
their
idea.
possession the red line and then without the red line. And the red line is like, there's a lot of red.
I mean, I would welcome, you know, I mean, if someone has a problem with it, now is a great time for them to say, hey, what is this? And you can either explain to them why it needs to be there, or we might sit there and say, good point, get rid of it.
Well, again, I'll try to wiggle a recommendation in here, is that I obviously am inclined to say May is the best time frame. Because the voters are used to us developing questions for town meeting, they hear about our budget discussions, they're used to that time frame. So if we just incorporate this into our budget process and we you know, okay, budget now, okay, now we're done with that, let's move on to TIF. We'll move on to that, maybe we bring up the land trust proposal. Now they're all in line for May. You can decide whether you want to do them by referendum. I think you guys have already stated your personal opinions on that. It just makes too much sense.
Now, you're gonna need a motion to cancel the February special town meeting, right?
Well, technically, the motion was to pressure Jim to write a development program, which I think I delivered.
We never set a date, technically.
Yeah.
We just,
Well, we did with the timeline, and that's what,
we didn't approve the timeline, did we?
No, the motion, it's in the minutes that we have, was to pressure me, and I wrote it down because I was like, okay, then I have my marching orders, and I feel like I fulfilled the motion to get a development plan. Now, what I thought would happen tonight, minus the new information, was that you guys would review, decide if this was what you wanted to go forward with, and then we would decide if we were ready to set a warrant at the next selectmen's meeting, which would have been the official trigger
okay.
for this. And I know when I spoke to Ryan, I was really hard to nail down about whether we were having a special town meeting, because in my eyes, we hadn't actually triggered it yet.
Actually, Steve Ham did make the motion at the last meeting to reintroduce TIF for a vote in March by referendum vote. Warrant to be signed on 12/11/2013.
Is that how it went in
Yeah.
the minutes? Okay.
So therefore,
I make a motion to cancel the special town meeting.
Seconded.
any more discussion? All those in favor?
That's
So now, do you need a formal motion to put that draft up on, or is that just something, okay.
But I would like everybody, I would like the selectmen to read what we put together. And maybe at our first meeting in January, we set aside a little time to discuss and see if the changes that we've made it are appropriate. I went to a training session the other day. It focused a lot about TIFs. I knew 90% of what they had already put up there, but I learned a few things too, and I'd like to bring those to the table.
Why don't we try to get together on our first meeting in January, a half hour early,
Okay.
as a workshop? Can we do that? I mean, I'm game with you guys,
Fine with me.
At least that way, I mean, one thing I know for sure, if there's something in that TIF that's bad for the town, Chuck will find it.
Well,
And I mean that in a good
let's
way.
just not have Chuck find it. Let's all read it.
Well, that workshop will be public, right? It's not an executive session.
No.
But
Everything's public.
executive session's not public.
I will say that
You have to go into public session to have an executive session.
the marked up copy that you sent us, there's a lot changed. There's a lot of red on that document.
It's not the
And I
same.
also noticed very little blue that Ron had to change after you get done with it.
The blue is
Don't
the
say that too
attorney's
much, he'll
choice.
be asking for the $200 odd an hour what he gets. Okay, Bryce Budget Committee request. Kinda have to table that because I have to abstain, and there's only 2 selectmen here anyway, so.
So we don't have a quorum.
Right.
The new information is obviously in front of you. We've had another person that's interested. They told me their interest over the phone, so that's why it's not signed.
Okay.
It's just an internal form. So
Right. Well, I understand.
Goals and objectives.
So the memo in front of you is the recap of our goals and objectives workshop. Really for tonight's purposes, I just want you to review it and tell me if we captured it correctly. It is a historical account of what we can go back and look at what we set as goals at one point in time. So
Can't even find it.
You'll find the whiteboard.
I haven't come across it yet.
it's a 3-page.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I found it.
Yeah.
I would say we approve that next meeting rather than try to read 3 pages, you know what I mean?
I agree.
You're okay with that? Okay, let's move on then. Rather than have dead silence.
Good TV.
Yeah. Moving on to reports. Jim.
Okay, I shuffled the deck a little bit on the way we put together our agenda so that we knew that people would leave as soon as we got done some of the hot topic issues, so I appreciate the flexibility. First, MMA Executive Committee report. So obviously I'm starting to do some of my duties on the MMA Executive Committee. I'm not a formal voting member until January 1st. But the last meeting I was actually pretty vocal about a particular topic, and I thought it would be a demonstration to the board of what we do there. The board decided to do kind of an equity change of the due structure. Some towns are paying way more than they probably should, and some towns are paying way less than they should. So they redid the due structure. And when they redid the due structure, it had like minimal to no impact on the town of Boothbay. It really had some of the southern coastal towns really took kind of a beating on this one. And one of the strategies that MMA decided to do was, while they were redoing the due structure, is they would not ask for a dues increase. So that would kind of take some of the pressure off some of the towns that were going to be singled out for kind of this equity adjustment. Well, now in the last meeting we were doing budget discussions, and so with a 0% increase to dues, we've created kind of a negative carryover fund balance, and there were a lot of MMA executive committee members that wanted to adjust it in the budget. And actually I took a position it's kind of a little foreign to me. As I said, we self-inflicted this budget situation. We have a good fund balance, which we just heard from our auditor would be a nice thing to have in the future. Let's take advantage of this good fund balance, and let's just take it out of fund balance this year and see where it goes in the future. So where that position is very foreign to me, and I'm acting on behalf of the town, I wanted to let you guys know that's kind of some of the stuff we do there. We did a lot more in that meeting, but that's the gist of it. Any questions about the MMA Executive Committee? It's kind of a fun group to be a part of. We learned a lot already. The Maine Town and City Managers Association Executive Committee, I'm also on that board. And the last thing that we just did was we put together a Maine and New Hampshire managers workshop on personnel, which we get a lot of legal professionals in there because they want to be in touch with us because they want to sell us services someday. And we ended up pulling off a workshop that would have cost several hundreds of dollars for about $60 a person. Really good savings for the town. Those are the things that we do in that organization. Any questions on Maine Towns? It's less glamorous. The Comprehensive Planning Committee, in your packet, there's a sizable piece from the comp plan. They're almost done right in the objectives portion of the comp plan. So this is almost a final version of what that piece is going to look like. There are some changes in this document that haven't been incorporated yet. Chuck, you're the chairman of the Comprehensive Planning Committee. Do you like to add anything?
The only question I'd have would be for you, have we heard from Mark on when we may have a draft?
We haven't yet. Yeah, the last discussion that we had with the comp plan was, geez, we're pretty close. When can we put together a draft document so that we can start poking at it? We're pretty close. Anything else? Annual town Christmas party. So the Christmas party is the 16th. I didn't write it down in my notes. And for the first time since I've been here, we're going to have our Christmas party at a for-profit vendor in the town of Boothbay, which I'm pretty proud of because that means we have a facility in which is open during the winter time that we can do that. So it'll be at the Watershed Tavern, and we've started to make arrangements already. Also, you'll see in your invitations that there's this weird initiative that the town manager likes to change things up. Trying to make it a tax-free Christmas party. In the past, we've used public funds to pay for the Christmas party. This year, we're asking for donations to see if we can self-fund the Christmas party. It's a pilot program. If it doesn't work, essentially the town manager ends up holding the bill. I am personally paying for all of our employees for their contribution because we hear rumbling about people that don't support the Christmas party, so we want to see if we could support it ourselves. So it's a trial, and we'll see how it goes.
The only problem I have with that, maybe I'm the lone one here. It's the one time a year that you choose to recognize your employees, so to speak. I don't think that there's anybody out there in the town's taxpayers that's going to complain about you buying a dinner for the employees. I don't think that should fall on your shoulders to pay for that. That's not part of your job description. I think that it should be. I mean, in most private businesses, you get bonuses and whatever else. I mean, to have a Christmas party for a town employee, I don't think it's been going on for years and years. I don't think that should fall on your shoulders. I think that we plan on it, we've done it for years, it's been a tradition. It's a Boothbay business, which is even better, like you said. I just don't think it should come out of your pocket.
I periodically buy staff lunch and
But that's different.
things like that.
You know, I mean, that's you saying to your employees, that a boy. You know what I mean? Which is great. And I'm not saying, don't take it like I don't appreciate you paying for staff. I think that's great. But I think once a year, I think the town's good. I mean,
Not with you.
It's what, $20-25 a head usually?
We're recommending a $20 donation per person.
No, I'm saying that's what it usually costs us.
Well, that depends. Since I've been here, we've reduced the cost of the Christmas parties significantly over every single year. Last year probably cost us $3,500, something like that, maybe $4,000. So.
I just don't want to see you have to pay it out of your own pocket.
Well, I'm certainly open to a reimbursement if the selectmen are so inclined.
And I think we have it in the budget every year to have a Christmas party. I mean, it's always paid for.
Well, technically, it comes out of the selectmen's contingency
Okay.
fund.
Well, I don't have a bit of problems with that.
Sure.
And I would argue with anybody that sees Channel 7 and feels different. I mean, it's once a year, it's Christmas.
Our employees are all hardworking, and they give us everything they got. I've seen Christmas parties in the past where our public works crew have had to go out plowing during the party. I think for $3,000, we can give them a Christmas party.
I don't want to see you have to pay for it. And I think you should be commended, honestly, for offering to do that. I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that goes above and beyond. But that shouldn't. It's not part of your job description.
It's just a pilot program. We're trying to see if we can free it.
And I think it's great that you're trying. I just.
At the same time, you haven't seen my proposed budget yet, so.
I don't think that there's anybody out there that's going to complain about feeding the town employees once a year.
Right, and you're only proposing the meal. It's on the invitation. It's a cash bar, so you're not looking to supply everybody with alcohol. We're talking about giving them a meal.
Yeah, and in the early stages of the Christmas party, when I first got here, we had a sit-down meal, and we experimented by saying, hey, let's get away from the sit-down meal and have a social, small orders and stuff like that. And that actually I thought was we were wondering how that would go, and it ended up being a great addition. I think people had a better time last year than they did in previous years because they just kind of mingled. And
Yeah, last year it was held over to the botanical gardens.
right.
And I will attest, I think it was, I had much more fun being up on my feet and floating around and socializing and talking, than being trapped in a table with a certain 3 people or 4 people, and that's all you see all night long. Yeah.
Right.
Hey, I think that if I was an employee of yours and I knew that if I went to a party and you was picking it up, I would feel guilty. I would. I mean, I would feel bad that you're paying my way. And I wouldn't feel so bad if my employee was paying my way. You know what I mean? I just, that's just me. I think you keep your money.
I'm with you.
Continuing on, department meetings, we're doing another round of safety audits. We do those quarterly. It's been a nice addition to our department meetings. Public Works, I think everybody knows what they've been doing the last few days. They've been sanding, worse sanding and salting than plowing, but we'll take it. Either way, I mean, a lot of people will say we didn't get a lot of snow, it must save the town money. Truthfully, it costs about the same amount for us to go out and sand and salt than it does if we have the blades down. It's negligible.
You saved that edge of the blade a little bit.
Yeah, we'll save a blade.
Yeah.
I almost think you spend more on sand and salt when you have these half-inch storms.
Yeah.
Because that's more slippery than if you get a foot of snow.
And usually the refreeze is what's really expensive because then you have to go out sand and salt, then you have to go back out the next morning sand and salt.
Yeah.
It's just continuous. So my hat's off always to the Public Works at this time of year. Assessing is, I don't really have anything to report. They've finished their spring work and they're doing pretty good. They're working on mapping right now.
When is that hoping to be done?
It's on track. It's going to be delivered sometime this spring, probably near town meeting time. He will let us know when he's got the exterior boundaries drawn out, which is kind of like the.
And he'll come in when it's all done and give us a presentation.
Yep. And we'll give you updates as soon as he's got all the ortho imagery. He shared that ortho imagery with Leighton and Associates because he's still trying to sweet talk them into all the surveys so he can use that in his data. So it's going to be a work in progress. It's going to take the whole spring, and I think that's why they did the spring work early. Code enforcement has actually slowed down. Maybe that's a seasonal thing because last month they were buzzing, but right now they're slowing down, and we'll take it anytime we can catch a breath. Business office foreclosures happen next week. We still have 21 properties that are in pending foreclosure, and I wish I could say that it's not a normal number, but it's a very normal number. That's all I have on department.
When I forget when you said that you hope to have a report on the cell tower from that independent.
That'll be January 10th.
I couldn't remember if it was this month or last. And the only reason I remember, I forget the lady's name that was here. That's what made me think of it. So.
January 10th, we'll have that report. And as soon as the town receives it, it's a public document, so we'll send it to you, and I'm sure everybody will ask for a copy of it. So late January. Oh, that's another thing we've discussed that I guess fits in department head reports. That training session that we want to do with the Board of Appeals and the Planning Board got caught up in all the TIF discussion too, and then the changeover in lots of the board members. So now we're aiming for January.
Would that be appropriate with this pending?
We're asking Sally right now.
I could see where you could make that argument. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you can make the argument both ways.
Exactly.
We were supposed to touch base with Sally today to ask her opinion, because I mean, also there's some benefit to doing a training session with the Board of Appeals right before they hear a major appeal. Either way, training is always good. And actually, Mike Tomko snuck in the back. Mike and I went to a training session the other day, and he asked me if he could do and participate in some of our training that we're holding in-house, and the extension is always out there for our neighboring towns. If you know we're doing training, and sure, if we're already footing the cost, it's not going to cost us any more to put another seat out there. That's all I have on reports.
Now we'll move on to new business, which is appointee recognition, and that's brought up from discussing, the resignations that we've had and stuff from different boards, which spurred the conversation between Jim and I, which then I had with Chuck and Dale and the other two selectmen as well. So we decided to put it on the agenda. At what point when you have people come and go all the time, at what point do you choose to recognize somebody and not recognize others? I guess, am I explaining that correctly? My first thought would be, if you've worked for the town in some capacity for 10 years or more, you ought to get recognition for that. That's my opinion. But I don't know, I guess, what past precedents. You've been on the board a lot longer than I have.
I can tell you that past precedent was 10 years or more.
And that would make sense to me. What do you do with that?
I don't, the big thing with me is there's a couple of factors in this. One, you have to have some kind of parameters, because if not, somebody sits on a board for a year or 2 years, they go away, and now we have to recognize, and that to me is just ludicrous. So I have no problem with setting some parameters, but what are those parameters? What you have to, for lack of better anything, if somebody voluntarily walks away from a board and says, I've done my 15 years, or my 10 years, or my 20 years, whatever the case may be, and we say, okay, we've got a 10-year thing, we recognize. If somebody doesn't voluntarily walk away, does that take the precedence away? All I'm saying is, whatever we do, if we're going to have this discussion in a public meeting, we have to set some type of guidelines to go by for everybody down the road, as far as I'm concerned. You just can't
That's where I think, I mean, if we go by, let's take the town manager's position, for instance. Say if Jim's with the town for 20 years, and then all of a sudden you get a bunch of brand new selectmen that just don't like the job he's doing, and they choose to terminate his contract. I mean, that, to me, 20 years means you ought to do something for the town.
It's like when we went to John's going away party.
But he voluntarily, and he
resigned.
Well,
right. But I do. I just think that a 10-year mark is a great benchmark to say, hey, you know what?
And I'm okay with that as long as, we're gonna set the parameters so it's consistent with everybody. I really don't mind, but I'm just saying those parameters have got to be set and consistent with everybody.
We discussed an employee versus appointee, Steve and I.
Yeah.
And see, essentially, an employee, I'm gonna do on a case-by-case basis anyway,
And he has that authority
But you-
because they work for him.
But you
I'd
have
say
that
the
authority.
same is true with the town manager. Use your authority to do on a case-by-case basis. You may not really like me when I resign, and therefore I don't really care if I get a gift. You do it on a case-by-case basis. But appointees is harder because
Yes, it is.
because
Right.
that's your jurisdiction.
But
I
the same
don't-
thing can happen. You can change over a board, and one board loves a particular employee, the next board doesn't. So, I mean, that appointee could be there for 40 years, but if you get a new board on that all of a sudden doesn't like them, I mean, I think that, again, you set your parameters and live by them, and I think a 10-year is a great benchmark to live by.
And if that's all we're gonna put on this time, that's fine. But I'm just saying, whatever the parameters set, I think they need to be set.
I mean, we have, I'll leave it alone because I don't want to be putting the cat out of the bag for one, so. I think that 10-year benchmark would work. So, that's my opinion.
Fine.
like I said, that's what used to be done in the past.
Do you want that in the form of a motion? Because ultimately, you're the one signing the check for if we do anything for anybody.
Where does this fall? You don't put it in a personnel policy. They're unemployed.
No, I would say, the selectmen all the time have various policies that they create from time to time. And sometimes the policy only triggers once or twice or something like that. I really, if you want it to carry on beyond your board, then, to the appointees, the selectmen that come after, you need to put it in the form of some kind of policy, even if it's just a brief paragraph that gets piled away somewhere.
So they technically fall under the personnel policy anyway, so.
I wouldn't agree, I don't agree with that.
No?
No, appointees falling within the parameters of the personnel policy. I'd have to do a little research before I could get on top of that subject.
I kind of think of the personnel policy as an employee, as a staff.
Yeah, well, the personnel policy
But I
obviously
can
doesn't.
see, I can see where it spills over to others as well.
The personnel policy immediately doesn't apply to you, and immediately doesn't apply to me. So then you can make the assumption that maybe it doesn't apply to appointees. So now you've already created doubt in that future board about whether this policy sticks. So,
Isn't there a policy on appointees somewhere in the annals of our?
Yeah, there is an old policy on appointees. That would be the perfect place to work it in. And truthfully, we should be taking these old policies. This is an old time clock policy, like dated 1987 or something. We should be taking those policies and pulling them out and refreshing them from
There's a
time.
story behind that time clock policy, I think,
Yeah,
from 20 years ago.
yeah. I'll have to hear it sometime. But we should be taking those policies and this, when we were talking about goals and objectives and I was talking about policy, that's what I meant, is we take these old policies, we shake them out, and we say, does this still apply anymore? So that would be a great one. I think you're right on it. If you'd like, I could distribute that policy to you guys and we could scribble in some kind of change and have it ready for another meeting.
I think, in the not so distant future as well, the administrative code. I mean, I don't think it needs to be a drastic overhaul, but I mean, we have found little things in that administrative code that needs to be changed. And we have a committee for that, correct?
We do.
Yeah, we put them together.
Right.
We put them together, we need to get them
Yeah.
charged.
That would make sense to get new year, new policies.
Thinking it over in my head, and I think that's a policy. I mean, the admin code's a law, so
No, I agree. I'm not saying it should go there, but I'm just saying if you're going to shake out policies and stuff, that ought to be one of them that you shake out.
oh yeah.
And there's no, didn't say that means that needs to go there. I agree. It's more of a policy than a.
Yep. So I'll get that copy. That's 2002 or something like that. But one of the first things that I did here when I got here, I was like, okay, where do we keep the policies and laws of the town? And I was like, here. And so we've collected them. And there may be some that exist that I don't know of. Technically, they apply.
So I will get with you tomorrow for ideas. I think you know my idea anyways, but I don't want to say it publicly because it would spoil the surprise. So it will be public soon enough. Okay, next up is the FY 2015 budget, town manager budget plan. Again, don't seem like it's that time already.
I really thought that everybody that was here before came for this.
Yeah.
So
We're still losing.
that's the presentation, so that I don't have to try to get you guys to look at the projector.
Did you see Ryan's face when you mentioned budget? He lit right up. He was
I'm ready-
excited
I'm
to
ready
be
to go.
Yeah. So, yeah, FY 2015 actually sounds a little bit foreign, but our fiscal year goes by the date in which it expires. So the end of this budget year would be June 30th, 2015. So I think I'm getting to the point where we're doing pretty good with the process. Every year I refine it a little bit more. So the first thing you'll see is that everybody's got one of these budget binders. And I even made one for the press. I've learned that we start discussing something and they don't have all the same information. We're discussing maybe a version of the budget that is 2 months ago and the press hasn't brought their copy. So what I'm going to try to do with these is I've tabbed them all out with all the sections of the budget. And as we bring new information in, I'm just going to write the tab it goes on. I'm going to give you all your copies, and it's your responsibility to maintain your budget binder. I'm going to maintain a separate one for the public. One of the things I've heard in the last few years is, where do I learn more about the budget? Well, we'll put it right at the town office. If you're so inclined, come on in. There it is. And so it's a full, transparent public budget process. You'll see everything we see. So if you watched it on Channel 7, you can come in and get that document. It's impractical to think that we could put all the variations of the budget up on the website or something like that all the time. So as we modify it, we'll try to keep the most current copy, like in section B, which is general government. The most current copy that we have will be on top, and older copies we'll keep in the back so that we can always reflect back on what we've changed. So I've already mentioned, as we get additions, I'll just write on the corner of it, it's section F or whatever. Now, outside organizations haven't sent all their requests in. You'll see if you flip in a little bit, you'll see like Mid-Coast Community Action, the Woodchucks. They've submitted their budget requests already, but we don't mandate that they have their budget requests until the end of the calendar year, which at one point in time I thought hindered how early I could release my budget. But essentially their requests have very little to do with my budget plan. So I think this process is going to help us at least get eyes on my budget plan, and then as the requests come in, we'll just put them in. So let me talk a little bit about management's proposed budget. And if you flip open, you'll see that first you have the table of contents, and then under tab A, this is where I'm going to start. It starts off with a real summary of the budget, and I think anybody that's been around for a few years recognizes that this is how I have presented the budget the last This would be the third year in a row. But it shows all of our accounts, E1 through E9, and the question always is, what is E8? E8 is the outside organizations, and if I thought more in advance, E8 probably would have been E9, so it didn't look out of sequence. But that's just the way it works. So essentially, these are our budget categories for the operation of the town, adds up to the FY 2015 total. I always compare it to the previous year to show the increase or the decrease. And in this budget year, I'm proposing a 0.42% increase, or $8,000, and I'll show you how we get there. Something that I'm really proud of, and if you go to the executive summary, which is right underneath that page, you see I've kind of given an executive summary of the budget. You could go line by line, but anybody that's just slightly interested in the budget, start with the executive summary first. This is one of those things that the town should be proud of, though, is in Table 1, what we're demonstrating is essentially the operating and capital budget of the town has remained largely unchanged for 5 years. So we're averaging an increase, a negative increase of 0.03%. What's that mean? We're operating on essentially 2011's same budget values. We've found ways to make flat budgets 5 years in a row. And I bet you could go 5 years prior and find out that it hasn't changed much since then either. I went 5 years just because it's more relevant to the discussion. But then the comment's going to come up, and that's why I worked it in here. Well, last year we had this huge rate increase. The town can't possibly have had a flat budget. Well, last year's rate increase were determined by these factors. There was a school increase, there's a Lincoln County increase. As you saw from the auditor before, those are large portions of expenditures that are factored into the tax levy. The refuse district had an increase. The ambulance service, even after the subsidy from Lincoln County, had an increase. And then the big glaring, staring us in the face, loss of revenues. Revenue sharing is down 58% since 2010. Investment interest is down 40% since 2010. Essentially, the economy hit the state, and the state took away the purse strings. If you pay attention in the news, the committee that was supposed to find the $40 million in saving at the state level potentially did so there may be more down the line. This is a reality that the town has to factor into our budget process, is that we can put together an operating budget, but we may have to face the fact that we'll lose revenues. And essentially, if you lose revenues, then you have to make a decision. Do we make cuts, or do we raise taxes? And it's a tough decision. So how have we avoided budget increases? And I just do the past 3 years because those are the 3 years that I've been here. And essentially last year, we reduced the public works crew size. It had ballooned from previous actions, but that was one of the things that kept us under budget. We restructured the water district agreement, and that finally kicked in. That's a really good thing. It helped us in our budgeting process. Purchase inefficiencies, you'll see in 14 we had reductions in the service account. Well, that's because we're just buying smarter, and not really large efficiencies. They're saving a few bucks here, and it adds up. And then we contracted assessing, and versus an in-house assessor, it's a huge savings, and that's what helped in 2014. 2013, we restructured code enforcement, and then the fuel purchasing was one of our flagship things that we did that year. 2012, restructured capital improvements, and I hate to say that we restructured the code enforcement. Yes, it's there twice. We did it twice. It saved us money twice. It just didn't work well the first time. It's working better the second time. So how will we do it this year? Essentially, there's no more tricks. There's no more gimmicks. There's no more restructuring. I can't restructure code enforcement a third time. So we need to increase the budget, or we need to make cuts. So that is going to be the lead-in thing in my budget. So when you start looking at the large expenditures that we make within our budget, the largest things that we do are paving and payroll. and actually payroll's huge compared to paving. Capital improvements is another large expense. But when you're looking at making significant budget cuts and not just efficiencies, you have to look at the large expenditures. So this graph is in your executive summary as well. And what I'm trying to demonstrate to you is the top line is our wages, essentially total wages for full-time employees. And you can see the line starts to go up and then it starts to come back down. We've been really good with restructuring and hiring employees and setting wages at competitive levels. And so we haven't had automatic wage increases that affect the budget. We've been able to manage that. I think we can manage that in the future as well. We might see this peak up and down and up and down, but as long as we manage it, it's a cost we'll have to deal with. Well, the bottom line is our benefits. And when I say benefits, I'm talking retirement and health insurance, and the glaring one is health insurance. And if you can see this is a percentage of total budget. So we have a $2 million budget, and as you see the benefits creeping up into the almost 14% range of our total budget, it's starting to be something that we have to look at. Especially where healthcare increases on average at 6.1% a year. It's something we have to look at. So this boils down into the bottom of page 2 of the executive summary, is that I'm proposing some policy changes that affect the budget to maintain that line that I put. Essentially, the policy changes that I'm recommending is that we change full-time staff from the Maine Municipal Employees Health Trust POSA healthcare plan to the POSC healthcare plan. Now that's a minute change when it comes to what the employees get as far as healthcare benefits. POSA is comparable to the POSC. Essentially, co-pays will go up, but it's similar healthcare plan. The employees will not feel like they've lost their shirt on this. And then that will give us a 1-year savings of $19,940. I'm behind in my slides. But essentially, the 1-year savings is not what you want to look at, because that compounds. It puts us on a different track for if it continues to be a 6.1% annual increase of healthcare. We've detoured that increase. The other thing is, and if anybody watches the news, they passed Obamacare a few years ago. Our POSA plan is considered a Cadillac tax when the ACA kicks in. Now that's not till 2017, and I'm proposing before 2015 we make the change. Well, I do that for a lot of reasons. And first and foremost, the POSA plan, because people know that they're going to have to move off it, is not a heavily carried plan in Maine Municipal anymore. There are 20 organizations that still use the POSA plan. So essentially, Maine Municipal Employees Health Trust is also going to make the decision, do we carry a plan that only a few people use? Or do we prop up our other plans? Be it on the Maine Municipal Maine Municipal Association's Executive Committee, I have inside information that leads me to believe that get off now. So that's why I'm proposing we change now. Now, I looked at a lot of other examples. I put high deductible plans, HRAs, HSAs, self-administered HSAs, and essentially what I felt was we take away a lot of benefit and get in return very little value. This is, I thought, the best middle ground of a reduction in health care and savings to the town. It's not enough to continue with a flat budget, so I make another recommendation for another policy adjustment. To change full-time staff retirement contribution over the next 3 years to a more equitable employee-employer cost share. This would look like this. Essentially, right now, retirement for full-time staff, the town pays 10% of salary. The employee is not required to put any matching contribution at all. So it's a 10% to 0%. You see I use the ratio as I go along. So in year 1, or the FY 2015 budget, I'm recommending that we shift from a 10 to 0 to a 9 to 1. This is baby steps. And I'll explain why we take baby steps in a moment. Essentially, this achieves the $5,000 savings in that year 1. And I think that complements the change to the POSC plan as a holistically a nice move that saves us enough money that we can move slowly. But it only works if we make multiple changes. So year 2, which is FY 2016, I'm saying go from that 9:1 ratio to an 8:2 ratio. Essentially, the employee puts in 2% of salary, we'll put in 8% of salary into their retirement plan. Year 3, that would go to a 6-3. Now that's still a very rich retirement plan. And I've given you in the back of tab B the MMA salary survey stuff on retirement and healthcare, so you can see what other towns do. I don't want the selectmen to make changes that they're not educated on. I've educated myself on these, but essentially where that leaves us is a POSC plan, which is still a very good healthcare plan for the money. It puts us at an equitable retirement plan, which I think you'd find we'd essentially be able to do a $2 to $1 relationship, maxing out at 3%, with no max contribution by the employee. They can put as much as they want. And the reason why baby steps make sense is I'm fully funded merit raises in my budget. Merit raises are funded at 3.2% according to my budget. That doesn't mean everybody gets 3.2. That means that's the average of what we can do for merit raises. If you're a good employee and you get the full amount of your merit raise, you can take your merit raise and offset your retirement, and essentially your out-of-pocket doesn't change. And over a 3-year time, we can make a substantial change in our benefits package, and it wouldn't essentially hurt our employees. I can tell you we met with the employees this morning. They're not entirely thrilled with this plan, so you'll hear from them soon. So this has an effect for multi-years. So I forecasted it out. Now these forecasted budgets are based on the fact that no service changes happen and we don't have to make any substantial changes to the budget. And you'll see in this budget, I haven't really made any substantial changes. So it's plausible that these forecasted budgets may work out. But you've taken one of the largest expenditures, and that's essentially personnel, and you've said, we're gonna fix this for the next 3 years, and it gives you certainty over healthcare costs, benefits costs, and wage costs. So in these numbers, I've calculated in wage increases, benefit reductions, healthcare increases are all factored into this. So in FY 2015, essentially you have that $8,000 increase to 0.42%, but in FY 2016, you have a reduction of 0.76%, and we actually will cut back $14,000. And in year FY 2017, you can see that goes even further. There is a little caveat that I'll say about 2016, is that our debt service runs out, and that's why that negative number is so large. So, we factored in all those things. I've literally created a budget for 2016 and 2017 to come up with these numbers. So this is exactly what I told you earlier. The Maine Municipal Association excerpts from the salary survey, and I didn't give you the full salary survey. It's just too much information. I gave you between 4,500 population and 2,500 population, every town that filled out the survey. The survey is not empirical. It's a voluntary survey. You don't have to fill it out if you don't want to, but the majority of towns fill it out, and it gives you a good snapshot of what towns do. So what does this do in the big term? We just had our auditor in here, and we're talking about how do we replenish our undesignated fund. So our revenues are going to see a huge decrease this year, just because our revenues last year reflected $102,000 contribution from Lincoln County Health, and I'm forecasting that we won't get that this year. I think that's a pretty good forecast. Now that expenditure is what I've represented in my management budget. So this is how it plays out. I would essentially offset our budgeted transfer to our undesignated fund by the same amount that we lose in revenues. So that budgeted transfer to the undesignated fund in the previous year is about $250,000. those are the kind of flexibility things of having a healthy undesignated fund, that you get flexibility in making adjustments to your budget and maintaining a stable tax rate. Now, I threw out a few other facts in here. The average increase in new value tax is about $16,000 or almost $17,000. Whatever that is, goes into that budgeted transfer undesignated fund, and that's how we're replenishing our undesignated fund over many years. So essentially, if this all works out according to budget and plan, the estimated impact to the tax rate based on this is 0. Now, we haven't seen a school budget, we haven't seen a Lincoln County budget, but based on our budget, the impact is 0. And I took by the projections of the forecast or the previous budgets in years past, that's essentially the goal. So now I've itemized down, and I'm going to fly through this really quick, because what I expect the selectmen to do is to take this home, and on January 8th, we'll come back and you'll have written in the margins, Jim, what's this mean? What's that mean? So we've got a lot of learning to do about this budget, but I'm going to tell you the general scope of each individual. So tab B is general government. And really there's only one major change in there, and that's attributed to the change in employee benefits, which saves in that budget area $9,800. Public safety, there's just a microscopic change to fire protection, which is just accounted to the fact that we didn't have a good budget number, so we just threw down a budget number based on estimates. And this year we have an exact budget number, so it looks like a savings. Public works, there are multiple changes within the public works budget, essentially a savings in employee benefits of $9,500. And if you look at a lot of the track records, we've been underfunding maintenance and repair, as you saw from our auditor discussion. We bumped up supplies, we bumped up snow removal a little bit, we bumped up fuel purchase. Those are all based on just the cost of doing service. Capital improvements is actually pretty dynamic this year. So as far as an appropriation, it's the same. It's $140,000, which is an increase of 0%. But we have a capital improvement fund balance. Isn't that nice? I know I get excited about this stuff, but you don't. That's $289,791. When you add the 140, we've got a fund balance for our capital improvements that we can actually do some work with. I know that the knee-jerk reaction when you see $500,000 in a capital improvement fund is say that's too much, let's cut the budget there. But we actually have a budget deficit in capital improvements in 2020. So if we add the 140 in there, it calculates out that if we replace all of our equipment, we end up coming up like 70,000 short in like the year 2020. So I don't recommend any cuts in capital improvement. Now 2020 is a long ways away, and I'm hoping that we've replenished our undesignated fund by 2020, and maybe the solution is maybe we take this $70,000 from the undesignated fund. But that's way too far in advance to forecast. So the things that we will be asking the selectmen and hopefully the voters is we were supposed to replace a plow truck last year. We've budgeted that for $150,000. We didn't need to do it last year, so we pushed it off to this year. We do need to do it. It's not going to be the oldest truck in the fleet, and it's not the one that is listed for replacement in the capital improvement plan, but that's the nice thing about having a plan is you can deviate from it. We're going to actually, instead of replacing an international, they tend to last longer, we're going to replace one of the GMC 5500s, and we'll probably go with something that lasts a little bit longer. So that's the plan there. The fire department has been saving up for some turnout gear. They just wrote a grant. We're asking for $30,000, but essentially if they get their grant, we're just going to be responsible for the matching funds. The mapping project is included in their capital improvement plan, and this is a thing that I'm springing on you right now, is when the comprehensive planning committee finishes, we're going to have to align that with the zoning ordinance. I would like to have some money to hire somebody to help us do that. I'm really interested in if Plan and Decisions would do that. I know I've thrown the concept out a few times, but here it is in money. All of these things are consistent with our long-term capital improvement plan. we can fund those with the money that we have. General assistance, no changes, we're doing really well. Essentially, when they made the changes to general assistance at the state level, it had a minimal effect to our general assistance. We appropriate 10,000, we usually use about 16,000, and then the state reimburses us half of that. So we come out on top every year. The service account, a small bump in advertising. The Boothbay Register costs us way too much. Hopefully they watch this. Contract services, we're bumping up $1,000. Those are just minimal costs. Some of it's cleaning, stuff like that. Electrical, we're actually making a reduction based on the cost of electricity in the solar contract. So minimal things. Debt service, last payment, that's the last one. And so this budget will represent the line in future budget years because it's good to have a debt service account. But this is the last payment on that 1999 loan. Insurance ends up to be a reduction of about $200, but these are just small compensations in the premiums. And this is our schedule for budget deliberations. I know it's not formal, but I like to keep a timeline because then we know if we're falling behind or getting ahead. We never get ahead, but so our next scheduled meeting for budget deliberations would be January 8th. I've marked in the fire department the next meeting, funding requests at the meeting after that, more budget deliberations. But essentially it depends on your comfort level on what we do. So if you think you want to talk to department heads on January 8th, we'll have them here. So there's nothing more important to us than budget. So that's it. That's the town manager budget presentation. The statute says I'm supposed to provide you a budget. There you go.
I think, at the very least, we ought to have a workshop with the department heads about the budget because it's going to affect their employees. I mean, if this proposed budget, as you're proposing it right now, is going to affect the employees, I think that we owe it to them to hear them even before we start discussing. I mean, that's my opinion.
I wouldn't necessarily say just for the department heads.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you have a workshop with them and let them know let the employees know they're welcome to come too. But I mean, in theory, you would think that the department head would be speaking for their employees. In theory, but I mean, I'm not saying that they can't come by no means. I mean, I want to hear what they got to say.
Well, when we're looking at department heads, there's Jim, Mike.
Technically, we don't really have any department heads,
Other than
but
Mike.
we call them department heads for the sake of the fact that we have leaders within the departments.
Why can't we just have a workshop with all the employees if they want to give them a chance to, at least give them a chance to speak?
This is something that I think is necessary. It's not part of my budget plan, but this is essentially what the budget looks like without the benefit changes. It's a 1.79% increase, essentially $34,000. So this is the tough decision you guys get to make. Luckily, I don't get to make the decision. I get to put out a budget plan and then I buy it. Is that, are those budget cuts appropriate for that savings? And it's rhetorical.
So to go back to that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. To go to a zero budget. I'm going to state the obvious, you won't like me. For a zero increase in the budget, if I just saw that, where would you could scroll down just a little bit?
This was
So if you take that 34, if you took 34,343 out of there, we would be at a zero increase.
yes. This is not my proposed budget.
No, that's if.
This is a mock budget with no
Right,
benefit
right.
reductions. I have 35 different variations of
But
this budget.
my next statement that you probably wouldn't like is if we took the 30,000 out of planning, we've
It's not a solution you make Because essentially,
I would need to know more what's in that 30,000, I guess would be.
yeah.
Right now, that, my gut tells me, that's the easy place to start.
Well,
without
you,
knowing what
you
it
would
is.
not be reducing the planning line, you would be reducing the capital improvement line.
Knowing what I know now and how planning decisions works, and having gone through the entire, almost the entire process with the comp plan, in order for us to align our comp plan with our zoning ordinance, this is the cheap guy talking, we're gonna need some help.
And I might be coming to you with the FY 2016 budget asking for more planning dollars. I'm saying that without absolutely any basis for that, except for it took us the full amount of a year to do a comp plan. The zoning ordinance is gonna be more detailed and tougher.
I guess the fine line we have to walk, and I guess it's, I mean, we're probably all five have different opinions, is, I mean, we value our employees. First and foremost, you do. I mean, where is that fine line? I mean, I think you said it earlier, that you ask them to take a small hit. I don't know how you want to word it, but where's that fine line to keep quality employees? You know what I mean? I don't know that answer, I guess.
I think we all value all of our employees, but the thing is too, we also have to be realistic about what's happening with business around us too.
I agree. That's what I mean, that fine line. I don't know where that is. I mean, and I guess we're going to find it one way or the other in the next month and a half.
Yeah. And I think the place you start is by saying, are these benefits fair? And I had a hard time proposing this budget. I want to be honest that who works with our employees the most? It's me. And who knew that they were going to get beat on the head today when I told them about this plan? It was me.
Well, it'd be easier if, from an employee standpoint, if you was changing one thing, really. But when you're saying, okay, we're going to change your insurance coverage, be it minimal. I understand that it's a $5 bill more when you go to a doctor's office, and the higher deductibles, obviously. But then when you say, and oh, by the way, we're going to change your retirement plan at the same time, so now you've given them the 1-2 punch, so to speak. I mean, we all know, for the most part, people take, when you sign up for a job, the first thing you look at is benefits, obviously. So that's, I'm sure it's hard to swallow.
Yep.
I know how I would feel.
And I knew that if we came with a $34,000 increase on the budget, the first thing I would be asked to do is to look at places to cut, to try to maintain a flat budget. So I preemptively went to the places what I thought I could cut, and those were the lowest hanging fruit. I have nothing else that I value in our budget that I feel like I could cut.
Oh, I don't envy you. You're in a great spot. I say that sarcastically, of course. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be a hard discussion.
And they affect me as well. So
that's why we make the big bucks, right?
that's right.
Any more discussion on
No,
sitting there awful quiet?
I think we have to have this workshop with the employees and see how that goes.
Should we do that early before I mean, I know we already said at 6:30 we'd get together and have a TIF discussion in a workshop. Should we try to meet with the employees before that? I think we
Even
should.
earlier than 6:30?
Yeah, I think we should.
Well, you got 2 other selectmen that aren't here.
Right, but I mean, they got a month to plan. I mean, I think that needs to be before you even have any discussions, you need to hear what they've got to say. If they want to, they may choose not to. I don't know that answer, but I think that you really need to give them a chance to speak to us. And if we do it in a workshop, it's pretty relaxed, you know what I mean?
Why make them come to us? Why don't we go to them? I mean, the last time we had employee meetings, we went to them. So,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it would be. You mean come in during a working day, say 3 o'clock?
what do you think, Dale?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I was actually thinking the same thing. Last time we did a workshop, we just met in the afternoon here.
Sure. How soon do you think We should do,
On this topic, the employees will meet with you whenever you would like.
I don't suggest before Christmas.
I mean, I think that it needs, I think that it needs to be before our first budget meeting. Other than that, I mean, I don't think it matters. I just think it needs to happen before January 8th. So maybe that week before, right after the new year. Is that, it is? If we did it somewhere around the 6th or the 7th.
If you do 3 o'clock, you might get into an instance where you have public works workers that aren't on the clock, because they're going to be leaving shortly. They can
That's just
early.
their work schedule. Don't have them come in at 7, have them.
No, we can't. I was just throwing out the.
I mean, it don't matter to me. I mean, I don't know what yours, if we did it on a Monday or a Tuesday, if we
Monday
did it
would
at
be
2,
harder for me.
okay, Tuesday. What if we did it like 2 o'clock?
Or noon.
You don't want to, yeah, noon, that'd be right after their lunch, right?
Yeah.
Or is that more disruptive?
In that way, if you're working, could you get out for your lunch at that time?
As long as we knew it was over in an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to bring in temp help to do the office or shut the office down for a
Well,
little bit.
that's why I said, if we do it around 3 o'clock, we just close the office early. 3:30, close it an hour early.
Whatever works.
Sure. So the date is?
The 8th, the 7th, which is a Tuesday.
At 3 p.m.?
Yeah.
If that doesn't work, I'll make sure.
Douglas is retired, he'll bend. Steve, I don't know, he may be driving school bus.
Right, 3 o'clock would be tough for him, I think.
Right. But I think that it's more important to do it for the employee's sake. I mean, is the town office, the holiday hours you have, closed all day, Christmas Eve? What about New Year's Eve?
But we're open
No, they'll be closed New Year's Day.
New Year's Day.
Right, no, but I was gonna say, we could do it New Year's Eve day. Cause Steve don't have bus, no school.
Oh, it's not even a bad.
That's a Tuesday.
Yeah.
We close earlier, the public's gonna be pretty. Nobody's gonna really care. New Year's
Right.
Eve.
They're gonna expect it anyways.
You're
you
gonna
know,
expect
be-
some holiday hour change
Right.
or something, yeah.
So maybe that would be a better time, because if you close the office early, people are not even gonna miss it, because most places close noontime on New Year's.
And then the employees can go drink after the meeting.
Right.
As long as it isn't snow.
I mean, does that work?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah, fine.
Maybe let's shoot for that then. And have it at 2 o'clock, and then close the office at 2. They get after we're done the meeting and go home. Sound good to you? You alright with that?
I like it.
You just have to send us out reminders, because I'll forget.
Really.
Not that I'm forgetful or anything. Next up is public comment, and we lost our public. Oh, I have one question on the I guess it would be public comment. We pay, regardless of how much electricity we use for streetlights, correct?
Yes, they're unmetered.
So wouldn't it behoove us to make sure our streetlights are right?
Yes.
Because you ride around some, I mean, I don't know how you'd ever go around and take a list, but we have some that aren't working. Why pay for them if they're not working, is the point.
We have a street light report form that if people let us know, we fill it out, but self-monitoring is problematic. So if, I would say, if you know there's a street light out, call the office, we'll fill out the form, we'll submit it to CMD. That doesn't mean they'll fix it quickly, but they'll fix it. Yeah, they'll fix it someday.
But can't you take it off the bill if it isn't working?
Good luck.
No, but I mean, in theory, if they don't fix it within a timely time frame, I would think you could take it off the bill. We're being charged for it.
We're pretty effective at getting them replaced. I mean, the 6 months is.
If Ryan can put out a call, put it in the blurb about if you have a street light around your area that's out.
Well, that too, and with this being winter, Public Works is out over
Sure.
all of our roads, so if they happen to notice one, report it to Jim.
The only
Yeah,
problem
but-
with them is they'll touch them off sometimes because they're so bright that it will actually hit the photo eye and shut the light off.
Yeah. And really, you know, I agree, they're out there, but their attention is somewhere else.
Yeah, they're not, I was just thinking the same thing, they're not gonna be looking at lights.
And you know, and they may jot it down, but their attention's somewhere else. I think it's easier if we ask the people to self-police a little bit.
I wasn't thinking in the middle of a snowstorm, because
Oh, yeah.
So what you need is the people, I know, speaking for myself, I found out on Southport, if Jane Doe called CMP and says, my street light is out, I want you to come fix it, she's not apt to get CMP to come fix that street light anyways near as quick as she is if she calls the town office and gives me the number of the, and if the people can give you the number of the telephone pole,
Yeah.
and calls the town office with the number of that telephone pole and tells you where it is, and the town office sends in the proper form to CMP, you've got a quicker, better chance of getting it fixed quicker than you do by just the ordinary person bugging CMP.
Something that would be interesting to do at some point, though, is to ride around, because there's some in places that you would say, why is there a streetlight here? And I mean, there must be a way you can have them discontinued and pay less money for them, I would think. I mean, there's got to be. I mean, I'm not saying that kill all streetlights by any means, but I mean, there's some in some pretty weird spots for a streetlight that we must be foot the bill for, and it probably they served a purpose at one time or another. But why pay for something that? I mean, just on my road up the top of that hill, there's a streetlight there.
Yeah, it's a
No idea why.
It's a touchy political subject too, because one person's streetlight that they don't like is another person's valued streetlight.
True.
We've already had that since I've been here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I just don't know how they ever determine. I mean, you see them at intersections, I understand that, but other places, it just, I don't know. Okay.
One other thing while you're flipping through your budget, reading, there's something in the back of your public works budget that I was going to propose in my proposed budget, but I decided not to at the last minute because of the TIF. I thought that was complicated enough a subject to then to not throw another one out there. But at the last year's budget meetings, we talked about how can we do more roads? How can we fix more roads? So I put it together in a really quick memo, and when I reread it, it had some spelling errors in there. But essentially, the spreadsheet that's behind the memo is what I really want you to look at. The concept is borrowing money and doing a large paving job and paying for it over the same time frame that you would have done the smaller paving jobs. Essentially, it gets you more efficiency, you get more miles done, you get more paving done. But you have to convince the voters that borrowing money makes sense.
Like Edgecombe did. I mean, Edgecombe just went through that same process this year.
Mine is much more dynamic than Edgecombe's. Edgecombe is, we've got X amount of roads. It's going to cost us this much. Let's take out a loan. I'm saying as an operating expense, you borrow money. It comes out to be 11.8 miles of road. You pay for it over the same time frame, the same cost essentially over a 5-year plan, but you get more miles done. So I just want you guys to look at it, and for future consideration, maybe it's something we dust off in a couple of years.
One thing that would be interesting to take it a little bit further of just not just paving the roads, but I mean there is some roads in this town that no matter how much asphalt you throw at it, without redoing it, it does no good. So I think you've got to be realistic and say, if you're already to the point where you're saying, I know which roads I would choose in that 11.4 miles, you've got to be serious and say, out of them 11.4 miles, 2 miles of that needs to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's stupid to just keep putting asphalt onto something that's going to crumble away as first frost.
Yeah, and we don't generally apply asphalt to anything that will crumble in first frost. We do a lot more base repair than we had done in previous years. We just do it spotty. We don't replace a whole road's base. We replace a piece of a road's base. And we do that because we don't have enough money to pay for road repair. So the fact that comes up is essentially a road lasts about 15 years. We have 40.8 miles of road. We do about 2 miles of road a year. Do the math. It's going to take us 20 years to replace all of the roads. Well, in that 15-year lifespan of the road, some are going to wear faster than others. and you're gonna end up doing one road twice in a 15-year span, and another road is gonna get done maybe every 30 years. Well, that's, in my opinion, not satisfactory. So this plan essentially reduces that 20-year gap of replacing roads down to about 17.
So this current year that we're going into a budget cycle for now, has the bond payment in it,
Yes,
but after that it's gone.
correct.
So I think that if you're going to even consider looking at that, I think that's the best time to look at that.
The
Because you
hardest-
could put it in there and it wouldn't affect your budget.
The biggest hurdle is that you have to show the people, and they have to understand the concept of that this doesn't cost you any more. It's a bond payment that essentially averages out to the same amount, and you'll see from my math in there that it works. And I used real numbers. I called the bond bank. I got interest rates. It's a pretty dynamic plan, and I was going to come with that this year. And when I heard the TIF was going to be here, I said, "No way. There's no way those are going up against each other."
Well, based on other projects that we're working on that I've read, wouldn't it give us more flexibility in the future to look at rebuilding and paving larger stretches of road than we currently do?
Well, you think about it, you're always playing catch up now. So any way to get ahead, I mean, if you did a plan similar to this one that I have mocked up for you, and then just 1 year out of those, in that 5-year span, you funded a regular paving year, you would knock that barrier down, you'd catch up. And I think that's the kind of opportunity that we're supposed to be trying to make, right?
We put aside 140,000 a year right now for paving, correct? Or is it 100,000?
We put aside technically $217,000.
I thought it was 220.
I thought I was gonna say, yeah.
Okay, so say 200 just for a round number.
Yeah.
And if you all of a sudden decide you want to go for a bond to pave 11 miles of road, like you just said, how much is that? Would you say a bond would cost?
It's all in that sheet that I put together.
What
I mean,
section?
I broke it down silly style.
Public Works.
So it's in tab D behind, and if you flip to the second page of that, there's a spreadsheet. Now LRAP, when you read that, is Local Roads Assistance Program that replaced the Europe program. That's the money we get from the state. Now, honestly, that money is supposed to be used for capital improvement of roads. We throw it in our undesignated fund. So I think in future years we should consider just putting that in our paving and funding the 211,500 and adding the $58,000 into it. But in this plan, I don't account for it. But you can see I've factored in the cost of paying the loan off in this plan.
So you're saying a 5-year, how long for the bond?
4 years.
Oh, a 4-year bond
Yeah.
at $1 million.
Yep.
I don't see the payment amount.
If you look in the expense, those are payments on the bonds. Except for in 2015 where expense is road prep.
That's the expense is principal and interest?
Yep. You see the principal's got its own line, interest has got its own line, and then I add them up for expense.
So you could darn near do it with already what we're putting aside for money.
Right.
That's 2016 and 17 get you, but then it goes down.
Right. Yeah, you got to be flexible.
The reality of it is we've known for a long time that the money we put for paving hasn't changed much, but the price of asphalt sure has.
Yeah. And we do a lot with that money.
Yeah,
We
no
get a
doubt.
lot of work out of it.
But looking at your proposed list of what you would do with a bond, that's a lot of paving.
That's 25% of the roads in the town of Boothbay.
Wow.
Well, if we're able to do a TIF, would we even need to take out a bond because of the amount of money that would go into the district?
But it would have to be spent in that district.
It's going to be spent in the
Or
district.
affecting the district.
Right, we've already talked about you can be flexible, but we can't be foolish.
Like Back River,
Hardwick.
Back River, I get. Butler, I get. Back Narrows is a stretch. Industrial Park, yes. Hardwick Road,
Butler
yes.
Beath, you could use that argument,
Beath,
because they both funnel right to where you're going.
I mean, we'd ask for an opinion from DECD before
Right.
we did it.
I just think some of these are gonna have great chances to get those paved, and others, they're gonna be either on the fence or out the window.
Well, the big
Well,
ones,
I was
industrial.
thinking that we could use regular money to do the ones outside of it,
Yep.
and use TIF money to do the ones inside of it.
Oh, absolutely, I've been thinking that all along.
And it doesn't have to be that complex. We can pay ourselves back with fund transfers. So,
Okay.
you know, so, I mean, it doesn't, you don't even have to think it out that dynamically. But yeah, is TIF money appropriate? Yes.
But you know, you're taking that one step further. If you was to take a bond for $1 million, and you said, we're gonna cover everything within, that we can cover within the TIF district, so you may go to doing half the town's roads instead of a quarter of the town's roads. And you'd be that much further ahead. Matter of fact, you could, if you're gonna do half the town's roads, you would need to pave them again for a while, so you could stretch that bond out even longer than 4 years. You could do, say, 6, and yet would you actually save you money in that paving line over that 6-year span.
As quickly as the money would pile up in the TIF fund, why would you go out and borrow money if you already have it in hand and need to be able to use it within that
Yeah,
district?
but can you, yeah, well, no, within the district, I agree. No, what I'm talking about is, say if you're going to take out, I mean, like you said, some of these are abstractions, some aren't.
Yeah.
For the TIF district. So you do the ones that's in that TIF district and use the money in hand. I agree with you totally. What I'm saying is if you take out the $1 million and do the ones that aren't inside the TIF district,
Okay.
you see what I'm saying? And at that point, you stretch it out 6, 7 year bond, and you've just paid. I mean, you're going to say it's going to be less than we're setting aside for paving now, and you're getting a lot more done than what we had planned. That's a win-win.
Yep. I mean, there's a lot of discussions I want to have about TIF pre-approved expenditures.
I mean, it'd be nice to think that every 10 years, all you'd have to do is take out a bond for $1 million and have half your roads paved. Really.
And we have to be grounded too. How many roads can we prep in time to pave?
Right. No, I agree. I agree.
I mean, but I mean, I'm okay with hiring contractors to help us prep roads. I mean, that's sure if it gives us better roads.
As long as it's local.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's plenty. Local roads.
And I think it's a great conversation to have.
Well, that's
Some
why
night when it's not 10 o'clock at night.
That's why I couldn't let it die. The other thing is, I know that we keep beating this dead horse about the TIF allowed expenditures, and we talked about economic development director in those TIF funds, and there was some discussion about how we don't like it. Well, you can pay for salary of economic development with TIF funds if it's written into the TIF plan. Well, who does your economic development right now? It's me. If you figure out what percentage of my job is economic development, you can pay for that portion of my salary with TIF funds, which alleviates the general fund pressure of paying for salary, which you were going to pay for anyway. So these are the kinds of flexible things that we need to work into our TIF.
Problem is, as soon as people see an economic director, whatever you want to call it, they automatically assume that we're going to hire somebody. I mean, we heard it time and time and time again. And people were under the assumption that as soon as you pass that TIF, we were going to run right out and hire an economic developer. And whether it be false or not, that's what they assumed, because they read that in that TIF doc.
And if we're not comfortable writing it in there, that's one thing. But just understand that that's a flexibility that you're allowed to do within the parameters of the law. Trails development is allowed anywhere within the town, not even within the district if it has an economic development component to it. So you could build a trail in East Boothbay as long as it fosters economic development.
Really? And that's outside of the TIF district and totally okay.
Oh.
Yes.
There's our
So
water
if we
there.
started one goal, not that it's on our shoulders to do this. And not that I'm even suggesting, it's just a hypothetical statement like that, but if we want to start linking land trust to land trust to land trust through via trails, and where we can put that on the back of economic development, TIF money could pay for that.
Or you could put a walking / bike
Yeah, I was just
around
thinking,
down 96 around the point. I mean, boy, that would stir up a hornet's nest. But you could.
I've been wanting to do that for years.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the flexibilities that, and you just need to be able to explain to the voter that it's in your allowed expenditures as a possibility. It still needs to go to town meeting to be approved to be expended. And that's a message we had a hard time selling last time.
Well, we've got 6 months to do it this time.
Yep.
I think that's going to make a huge difference between our loud mouse and Ryan's quiet keyboard and John falling asleep with his camera. Hopefully we'll get it out.
I got a question. That's Glenn Heisen that was here, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And he's the prospective business
Yes.
going in to the TIF?
Yep.
What kind of business?
Automotive repair. He owns
Freedom Auto.
Freedom,
Freedom
right?
Auto.
And he wants to move that across the street from the entrance of the industrial park?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it looked
He
like
bought
there's
that
some work
property.
already going on
Yeah,
up
he
there.
bought that property that used to be the old redemp, that lower buildings, and that building that was some sort of a restoration place.
Yeah.
He bought all that.
And they're building a new steel structure.
Because of the TIF?
No.
No. He's building
But
that
he-
building.
So he decided to build it and
But
then
he'd
said, "Oh,
like
well,
to take
okay."
advantage of
Yeah.
the TIF.
Okay.
If everything, I mean, I don't know if he's met with you.
I
He's
think
got
Ryan should
more-
talk to Glenn.
He's
Yeah.
got-
Yeah. I just wanted to know some of the background.
I understand.
I
I'm
tell
just
you, the
saying, I think
property
Ryan
was the
should
old
talk to Glenn.
Lighthouse Restaurant, but I think that was before your
Yes,
time.
that's right.
Yeah.
Dairy Joy was across the street.
Yep.
I'm getting old. Okay, we digress. Entertain a motion to review the warrants and sign them upon review.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Yeah.
Wonderful.